agenda, Mr. Douglas McBride regarding DVP 148. We're adding item 6E, delegations pertaining to items on the agenda, Mr. Fred Taylor regarding Cemetery Bylaw 7084. Under item 11A, staff reports, report of the public hearing, disregard page 27 and replace page 51 with pages 51 and 51.1. Add item 11G, staff reports, water and garbage rate increase bylaws. Add item 14B, introduction of bylaws, waterworks rate and regulation bylaw amendment, bylaw 2009, number 7004.04. Add item 14C, introduction of bylaws, garbage and recyclables collection bylaw amendment, bylaw 2009, number 7089.01.
Thank you. And if we could just ask for an adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Seconder, moved and second. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And the adoption of the minutes.
So moved.
Seconder.
Agenda.
Sorry, go ahead. Please, go ahead.
Okay. I would like to move that we permit Mr. H.J. Pat Barron, who is presently listed as 20A, delegations pertaining to items not on the agenda, be moved to the front of the agenda, please.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Then we'll start off with the back to the adoption of the minutes and as amended. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. You did have a seconder or you did not?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Presentations. Maybe before we... Mr. Clement, sorry. Director of Finance has 2010-2014 financial plan. Mr. Clements? Wherever you are, sir. Oh.
All right, thank you, Your Worship. So this is a repeat of a presentation that was made to Council last Monday night at the Finance and Policy Committee of the Whole. So this is the staff's first draft of the 2010 to 2014 financial plan. As such, it's a draft that's being presented to Council, and now is there opportunity to have a review and ask questions, and for the public to have input into the project. So what we're going to go through in this presentation is a little bit about what the budget process is, the status of taxation increases, what's in the budget, taxation, property taxation, how it works, and how that might impact your property, reserves and surpluses. There's a short slide on debt. So this process actually started back in June of this year with a memo that went out to the various departments. And at this time, the departmental staff started to prepare their budget. So going right down to the grassroots level in the organization, people put together budgets that were then reviewed through their departments and up through their directors and general managers. This information was all then sent to the finance department, who consolidates it. And at that stage is really when we first began to see what the magnitude of the tax increase is and the impact on the 2010 to 2014 budget. It's also reviewed at that stage by senior management, including the general managers and the city manager. At that point, it goes back to the departments again for some adjustments, and it's in quotations because adjustments are pretty much always down. And is in return to finance, where the city manager recommends some higher service levels, and the package is assembled and presented to council. And that's the stage we're at now, and this is the stage where the public consultation and council deliberation and direction begins, which will ultimately result in a bylaw adoption. So in November, December is set aside for review and discussion, and staff are targeting right now January 11th to introduce a budget bylaw, and that will be adopted on January the 25th. This plan is subject to change. Council can add more meetings or extend the process, or we can even do it sooner if council so directs. We're not finished in January 25th. We take a bit of a break, and then what will happen in March and April is then we'll get more information from other agencies, and we'll take this information and tune up the financial plan and use that to set tax rates. And the final financial plan bylaw and tax rates bylaw must be adopted by May the 15th of each year. So the status of the property tax increase. So in 2010, which we'll sort of focus on in this presentation, is what happens in 2010, although it's a 5-year plan. There's a 3.4% overall property tax increase. Now that means that the city will be collecting 3.4% more taxation revenue from the existing properties in 2010. That doesn't mean that every single property will have a 3.4% increase. Your increase will vary depending on what property class you're in and what the impact of the changes in assessment are on your particular property. So right off the bat, Council we're in the process of a 4-year strategy to shift taxes from industrial taxes to residential taxes. So as part of that strategy, you'd see industrial taxes, that's major industries such as the Nanaimo Forest Products, Coastland, Western Forest Products. Their property tax rates would go down and the corresponding increase in residential. If there was no shift from industrial, the residential increase would be the same as the commercial one. So we've also included in the budget a 5% increase in water rates, and as I've said before, and we'll probably say every year, we have built in a 5% increase in water rates for the foreseeable future, an annual increase in 5% for the foreseeable future, and the reason for this increase is to fund our long-term plan for water supply, and that will include such projects as a new dam, a water treatment plant, and all the infrastructure required to deal with these issues. In 2010, we've also got included in the budget a 6.4% increase in garbage and recycling fees. Now, these fees are going up as a result of fuel costs, tipping fees, increased tipping fees, so the cost for the city to dispose of the garbage, a decreased market for recyclable materials, and some costs to replace some 10-year-old vehicles with new, more modern vehicles that can accommodate the new kitchen waste program. So the impact on a typical home, and we've used for the purposes of illustration at this point a $350,000 home as being a typical home in Nanaimo, would be an increase of $79.65 in property taxes. Now that's just the City of Nanaimo property taxes. We don't know at this stage what impact is going to come as a result of changes to schools, hospital, regional district, municipal finance authority, or BC assessment. So those are other taxing authorities. We simply don't know what their changes are going to be. The 5% increase based on average water use of 220 gallons a day would be $14.36 a year increase. Now, if people use less water, their increase would be less. If they use more, the increase would be higher. Garbage for single-family homes will be increased by $6.75. And, of course, if you happen to be a commercial property, for example, that doesn't have garbage, you would not be impacted by that increase. You'd have to arrange for your own garbage pickup. So the whole plan looks like this over 5 years. This is broken down into 5 years into the 3 major classes. So the top line is the blended increase, which is the average increase of all property classes. So as I said earlier, it's 3.4% in 2010, 6.1% in 2011, 2.1% in 2012, 3.1% in 2013, and 3.8% in 2014. And the reason for the largest increase in 2011 is largely as a result of a single project, which is the Bowen Road Quarterway Bridge upgrade, which is partially funded through property taxes and mostly occurs in 2011. You can see from looking at this particular slide that the industrial tax shift ends in 2012, and after that the increases are the same across the classes, and by that time the industrial tax rate should be comparable to the commercial tax rate, which is the objective of the exercise. How does this compare to what we said last year, because this is a 5-year plan? Well, last year we said that the tax increase this year would be 4.9% in 2010, and it's actually coming in about 1.5% lower than that. Unfortunately, 2011 has bumped up by about 1%, and that's due to a rather large number of factors. There's no single project that has caused that to occur. And it's lower in 2012, and 2013 is 3.3%. So what's changed from 2009? Why are the taxes higher at all? So what are the new things that we're doing that are influencing the tax rate increase? Starting in 2010, we will no longer be budgeting for a deputy city manager position. We've added some funding for energy efficiency projects. That's $175,000. And for anybody looking at the slide who's not familiar with finance department jargon, 10 means thousands, so 289K means $289,000. We've decreased budget for insurance costs by $84,000, and that's largely, we're not actually sure why that is. Obviously, it's based on a lower experience, so we've had fewer claims in the last few years, so we expect our insurance costs to be down in 2010. We're hiring 10 additional firefighters on June the 1st, 2010, so there's a budget in there of $434,000 for 7 months. In 2009, we had a budget to hire two assistant chiefs for part of the year. In 2010, they'll be in there for a full year, so that increases their budget by $141,000. The total capital budget for the fire department is $155,000 less than it was in 2009. We've increased the subsidy for the Vancouver Island Conference Centre from $651,000 to $886,000 for the operating subsidy, so that's an increase of $255,000. And we've increased the budget for snow and ice control by $185,000 to $600,000 based on the experience of the last few years. Some increases in the RCMP contract, which are as a result of increases to the cost for the prime system and also wage increases for the RCMP officers, along with a few other factors. We've also changed the way that we budget for the RCMP budget. So in previous years, we budgeted for 95% of the number of positions that we had approved from the RCMP. In 2009, we reduced that to 93%, thinking that we would that was more representative of what our actual experience and cost was. But that, in my opinion, is cutting it much too close. We didn't have much room for error, and our experience now is we're getting staffed more closely to the 100% level. So we're recommending to increase that back to 95% in 2010. We will be receiving some new rental revenue from 575 Fitzwilliam, which is the property that is being occupied by some members of the federal RCMP, and when the federal and provincial detachments occupy city premises, they pay us rent. The library levy is estimated at a 4% increase, and there's a few revenues that are decreased. So we're experiencing decreased casino revenue, investment income. We've lowered the budget for a transfer from surplus, and we've decreased revenue from growth, and there's a bit more information on some of these items coming up in future slides. And in higher service levels, we included a budget of $1,166,000. We actually are recommending slightly less than that, about $100,000 less than that, so the budget is a bit lower than what was planned. So what other things are in the budget? So some major initiatives in the next couple of years. So in 2010, we'll be buying a new fire truck, which will be funded from the Equipment Depreciation Reserve. We have in the budget a $4.7 million project to upgrade Bevan Park, and that is dependent partially on getting a $1 million rink grant. The first phase, sort of the planning and initial start of the Bowen and Quarterway project that I talked about, takes place in 2010, and it's two-thirds funded from DCCs and one-third from general revenue, which is taxation. There's a project to do a water distribution project, the number 1 reservoir to 10th Street and Park Street. That's $1.1 million. It's funded from development cost charges, and you'll see that it appears over the next few years over the slide, and we have a few costs associated with the water treatment plant. So in 2011, we have the start of the police building expansion, and this is a project to expand the police building to increase the occupancy levels. Now this will take place over 2 years, and it is proposed to be funded from borrowing, which means that in order for that to proceed, we would need to have either a referendum or an alternative approval process to get the approval of the taxpayers before we go ahead and borrow that money. There's a Matteo Sutton Park expansion for $1.1 million, which is funded from payments in lieu of taxes that we receive from the Port of Nanaimo. Sports field development was the second sports field, artificial turf field at Merle Logan. That's $1.8 million, which is funded half from general revenue, half from development cost charges. As you can see, there's the major portion of the Bowen Quarterway project, $7.5 million. The reservoir project I talked about earlier, South Fork Dam, some early costs related to that, even though we're not actually constructing the dam for quite a few years yet, and more costs associated with the water treatment plant. 2012 is another fire truck. In 2012, we're also proposing to build a fire hall, number 6, at Hammond Bay for $2.7 million, which is also funded from long-term borrowing, which, as I said earlier, would need to be approved by the taxpayers. Council will be receiving a report that they requested from the last meeting on the timing of this project. And Bowen Road is completed that year. There's a major sanitary sewer project at Better Tubs. And the last project on that list is to cover the number 1 reservoir as part of our water treatment program, and that's funded totally from the Community Works Fund, which is federal gas tax money. Less items in 2013. As you can see, the last one is the major one. So in 2013 and 2014 are the major components of the water treatment plant. And in 2014, we have a DCC project at Bowen and Northfield as well. have a number of ongoing programs. I won't go through this entire list. This presentation will be available on the internet, the city's website, so you can go through it yourselves. But it does highlight the fact that we are spending money on a number of things, including quite a few road programs, so major road rehabilitation on local roads, street upgrades. There's more than $8 million in those projects alone over the 5-year program. $5 million almost in storm capital over 5 years. $23 million in water distribution capital, and none of those were particularly large projects, so there's lots of projects over that period of time. So lots of money being spent on infrastructure over 5 years. The casino revenue, as I said earlier, has been reduced. We're anticipating $2.7 million in 2010. There was budgeted $3 million in 2009, which compared to an actual amount received of $3.15 million in 2008. So it has gone down over the last couple of years. Now, all this funding is allocated to ongoing operating programs. So any reduction in this funding would require increased funding from taxation, or you'd have to actually cut programs. So this is based on historical allocation. So we are allocating $331,000 to fund the RCMP. At the time we did that, that was equivalent to 4 officers. It's now more like 2. Property taxes was at one time a 2% decrease. It's closer to about 1.5 now. We're not even quite that. So there's the conference center debt is one of the other ones that is being funded from casino revenue funding. So higher service levels. So what these are is when so every year staff are asked to put together a list of higher service levels. So this is a list of projects, programs, or employees that the city staff believe would provide new and improved services for the city of Nanaimo. They're not automatically funded. They're brought forward for recommendation by the city manager and then for approval by council. Now this year there were actually very few requests by staff because it was recognized quite early in the process that there was very little appetite for increased costs. So we only brought forward things that we thought were of high value to council and to the public. So there was $1.6 million in requests, which represented about 11 full-time equivalent employees. What's being recommended by the city manager is 5 RCMP members. Now this is part of a program to increase the RCMP general duty staff by 24 members. The RCMP are requesting that be phased in over 3 years. Staff are currently recommending over 5 years. And council will also be receiving a report at the next committee of the whole meeting to discuss the timing of some potential alternatives for the timing of this hiring. To support these new members, we're recommending that council hire an additional full-time equivalent support steno for the police and increasing to watch clerk and exhibit clerk by half a full-time equivalent. Staff are also recommending a plan to put money in the budget to fund a plan for the Assembly Wharf and CP lands to enable future development. What was on the list but not recommended were the 3 other RCMP members that I mentioned, an arts and culture manager for the Parks and Recreation and Culture Department, increased funding for the Tournament and Festival Grant Program, and the structural repair work on Bastion that Council received a report on just at the last Council meeting. And we're not recommending that any funding from Council at this point because we're seeking support from service organizations. So taxation. So taxation is a relatively simple formula, which is assessment times tax rate. What's important to understand is the relationship between those two things. So assessment is determined by BC Assessment, Provincial Crown Corporation, and is not done by the city at all, and we have no control over that. Tax rates are set by a number of agencies that, including the city of Nanaimo. So maybe just quickly, there are 9 property classes, of which I've highlighted 3 of them as being sort of the major classes, and you'll see later on that these basically comprise virtually all the assessment in the city, so residential, major industry, and business and other. This is part of a cycle, so I just wanted to point out that this is a large cycle which will eventually result in tax notices being sent out in July the 2nd of next year. So who sets those tax rates? So the City of Nanaimo is responsible for setting our tax rates, and that comprises a little under 90% of the total tax bill. But the rest of the tax bill that's collected by the city is set by a bunch of other organizations, including the province on behalf of the school district, the regional district of Nanaimo, the Nanaimo Regional Hospital District, and the library. They provide us all with requisitions. They tell us how much to collect. We convert that into a tax rate. The Municipal Finance Authority and BC Assessment provide us with a tax rate. So the recent history of taxes, and this is the blended rate, so the average rate comparable to the proposed increase of 3.4% increase in 2010, is roughly in the 3% range over the last 5 years. Now this chart maybe shows it better, so you can see that over a 10-year period the tax rates have increased anywhere from a decrease of 1.6% in 2000 to a high of 6.5% in 2007. So there's a bit of a range there, but generally we've been looking at around a 3% tax increase each year. So as far as assessments go, I wanted to mention that in 2009 the provincial government froze assessments at 2008 roll levels, which means that in the most case properties last year were valued at their market value on July the 1st of 2007. So in 2010, a new valuation has been done, and properties will be valued at their market value of July the 1st, 2009. So there's a 2-year change, and right now, until we get more information from BC Assessment, we're not certain exactly what impact that effect will have on individual properties or even individual classes at this stage, which makes it very difficult for people to estimate their property taxes. You could use our estimated increase of 4.6% for residential, but until you know more about your assessment change, it's hard to do. And again, we have no information about other taxing agencies. As we get more information, we'll be updating our property tax estimator on our website, so people will be able to get better estimates at that point. So how do our taxes compare to other municipalities? So in 2009, so maybe I should go back and say what the source of this information is. So this information is gathered by the province of BC and the local government statistics department. And I took it right off their website. So it's based on municipalities. I've compared this to municipalities between 25,000 and 200,000 to get a bit of a range. And there's 27 municipalities that fall into that population range. So what it does is it takes the average assessment for that municipality, and that assessment is shown in the first numerical column there. So for example, Nanaimo's average assessment in 2009 was $323,000. The next column shows the total variable rate taxes. So this is the amount of taxes based on the assessment of your property, which includes all agencies such as school and hospital district. The difference between that and the total column is the total column also includes any areas that have parcel taxes, and it also includes utilities. So if somebody who bills separately on water, sewer, and garbage like the city does, that will be rolled into it. So to get kind of a representative example of what an average house pays in each of those 27 municipalities, that will tell you for an average assessment house what they pay in property taxes. So in Nanaimo in 2009, that average was $3,156. So of this list of properties that we compared ourselves to, there were 20 where the taxes were higher than Nanaimo, and 6 where the taxes were lower than Nanaimo. The highest one on the list was West Vancouver, whose total was more than $7,000, and the lowest one was, I think it might have been Langford. I'm not quite sure about that. So on commercial taxes, it probably makes as much sense as anything to compare the actual tax rates. And in this case, we don't compare quite as well. We are certainly higher than Kelowna. We're sort of in the same pack as Kamloops and Prince George, but we're higher than the average of all BC cities. Industrial taxes, in this case I've compared us to the other mill municipalities on the Island Sunshine Coast region, and we have the lowest major industry tax rate of any of those communities. Compared to all municipalities in BC, we're below average, and this is as a direct result of Council's long-term policy to try and reduce the industrial tax rates. This slide just shows some comparisons with us and the other municipalities which we are sort of closest to in size. And you can see from looking at this, for anybody who can't read the colors, the bottom bar is residential, and that represents what proportion of the assessment base is residential assessment. The tiny sliver right above that, which you can see on Prince George but not so much on the other ones, is what percentage of the assessment base is related to major industry, and the top is commercial. And all other classes are virtually irrelevant within this comparison. So you can see that, for example, Prince George has some major industry, the others have almost none, and Victoria has a higher proportion of commercial. Now this is the actual tax levy, so how much was collected in property taxes from those same municipalities. You can see, for example, in Prince George in particular, and Kamloops and Nanaimo to a lesser extent, how those major industry properties, even though they have a relatively small portion of the assessment, contribute greatly to the municipal tax base. And you can see in Victoria's example how the commercial taxes now pay more than half of the total the commercial properties pay more than half the actual taxes. So in Nanaimo, how this compares is the blue column here, the blue bar is how much the assessment is, and the bright green bar shows what the tax levy is. So 85% of our assessment base is residential. They pay 65% of the taxes. Major industry is less than 1% of assessment. They pay 3.1% of taxes. Business and light industry combined pay 13%, have 13% of the assessment, and they're almost 30% of the levy. So the major taxpayers last year. In 2008, for the first time, Harmac, Nanaimo Forest Products, was not the largest taxpayer in Nanaimo, but you can see in 2009 there's actually a significant difference between them and Woodgrove Mall. And the reason for Harmac's taxes being considerably less than they were the previous year are a result of the City of Nanaimo's tax shift, and also the province of BC rebated 50% of school taxes to all major industry properties in 2009, and my understanding is they will continue to do so in the next couple of years at least. So the largest properties in Nanaimo in terms of taxpayers are mostly the malls and commercial properties and BC Ferries. The interesting statistic in the box is that in 2009, the top 30 taxpayers, that's 0.09% of the taxpayers, paid $21 million, or 1/6 of all property taxes in Nanaimo. So this just shows the relationship between these other classes and residential. So what this tells you when looking at this is that in 2009, the major industry tax rate was 6.3 times the residential rate. The commercial rate was 3 times, let me try that again. The major industry rate was 6.3 times the residential rate, and the commercial rate was 3 times the residential rate. So you can see there's quite a gap between major industry and commercial. So in talking about property taxation, people say, well, if you got all this assessment change, why don't you have more money? Well, we only get more tax revenue when we have what's called growth or new construction. And this new revenue only exists when there's new assessment, which comes from an increase in what BC Assessment refers to as inventory. So this comes through subdivision or through new construction. So when somebody builds a brand new house or a brand new mall, that provides us with new construction. If someone takes a property and subdivides it, that provides us with new revenue. But general increases in market value do not generate more tax dollars. If everybody's house in Nanaimo went up 10%, that does not mean the city gets 10% more revenue. Now, how has this impacted over the last couple of years? Well, in 2009, we actually received $1.75 million from new construction. And that's because even though the construction stopped in 2008, assessments were based on the previous year's market values, and those only hit the assessment roll in 2009. Because 2009 has seen reduced growth and reduced construction, we're seeing much reduced revenue from growth. And right now we have only very preliminary estimates. This is one of those numbers that gets refined when we do our update in March and April. But right now, based on what we've learned from talking to BC Assessment, we're estimating it's just slightly over $1 million in revenue from new growth. So that's a $700,000 drop from the previous year. So we're talking about budgets. We often talk about revenue or about reserves and surpluses, because this is a time when people say, well, if you got money left over at the end of the year, why don't you use it to reduce taxes? So we'll sort of have a quick explanation of this, and Council will be receiving another seminar on reserves in an upcoming meeting. So a surplus is the amount by which a revenue exceeds expenditures in a year. But when we prepare the budget, we never budget on that basis. We always budget assuming that our revenues and our expenditures will be exactly equal. We don't budget for any revenue that we don't anticipate spending. So if we don't budget for it, why do we have a surplus? Well, it comes from a number of sources. One is if we get an unexpected revenue source during the year, which didn't happen in 2009. We also get it when revenue exceeds the budget. Some things that we budget for are difficult to forecast, things like investments and fees from recreation and services and other things. Those are very difficult to forecast. Now, in 2009, the news was all bad. Generally speaking, if they did not meet our budget's targets in 2009. We get a surplus when expenditures are under the budget, so less than what we budgeted for. And one of the major factors of this is vacant positions. So we generally budget as if every position in the city of Nanaimo will be filled for the full year. And that is often not the case. As staff turnover happens, we don't manage to fill the positions right away. And sometimes we intentionally leave the positions vacant if we don't see a need to fill them right away. So this causes a surplus in the budget. So budgeting tends to be conservative because we can't run a deficit. We are statutorily unable to run a deficit, so we always have to budget a balanced budget. And we don't experience a surplus in the capital projects because, generally speaking, the capital programs, we make sure that the money continues to be spent on the same kind of capital project. If a project comes in under budget, we'll spend that. For example, if a road project comes under budget, we'll expend that on another road project to make sure everything gets spent. So when we do get a surplus, what do we do with it? Well, we put it in reserve for the most part, and these are some reserves that have been built up and in some cases spent over the last few years. So things like property purchases, general capital, uninsured claims, in case we get sued for something for which we're not covered under the Municipal Insurance Agency. We have a reserve for uncollected taxes in case a major taxpayer doesn't pay their taxes and we're unable to recover the money through tax sale. We have used it for property tax reduction and continue to do so. And we also use it to fund some employment-related liabilities. So my estimate of what will be in reserve at the end of 2009 is $88.5 million based on the budget and what I've seen from expending. So $28.6 million of that is in development cost charges. Those reserves can only be used for development cost charge projects, and those projects for the most part are specified in bylaws. So those monies cannot be used for any other project. We have some statutory reserves which are done by bylaw, which have been approved by council, or in some cases are defined by federal or provincial statute. So one of the examples would be the Community Works Fund. That can only be spent on projects that provide cleaner air or cleaner water. So many of those reserves, in fact all of those reserves, have some restrictions on them. We have $27.8 million in water and sewer reserves, which can only be spent on water and sewer projects, which leaves $18.8 million in various reserve accounts, which breaks down largely like this. The largest one being our priority capital reserve, which is earmarked over the next few years to do seismic upgrade on a building. We have a large uncollected taxes reserve, as I mentioned earlier, in case a major taxpayer defaults and we're not able to sell their property, or by selling their property we aren't able to recover the money. We have a reserve for the Housing Legacy Fund, which is Council's long-term commitment to the Housing First strategy, where the city will provide some land and the province will provide buildings and will provide funding to the hard to house. Some reserves for computer and software. We have small property reserve. We have one reserve that can only be used for storm drains. We have some money set aside for sustainability projects, and these projects we're largely targeting at energy savings projects, so projects that reduce energy consumption and energy costs, and hopefully will also reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And there's a small number of, there's a large number of reserves with a small balance, so there's another $2.25 million. The kinds of things we spent them on in the last decade have been things like Neck Point Park, Lindley Valley, the Aquatic Centre, Oliver Woods Community Centre, our financial software, Harbourfront Parkade, Bevan Pool Retrofit, and the Port of Nanaimo Centre. These have all been major recipients of large reserve fundings. So the last section of the presentation is on debt and debt servicing. So this bar chart shows over a period of time how the debt per capita has changed in the city. So going back to the mid-1990s, you can see that over the mid to late 1990s and early 2000, the debt per capita drops. And this is largely because debt that was incurred in the late 70s and early 80s for infrastructure spending after the amalgamation of the city was dropping off. It was being paid off in full, and no further debt was being incurred until approximately 2000, when we borrowed for the Nanaimo Aquatic Centre. And in 2006, we borrowed $15 million in 2006 and $15 million in 2007 for the Port of Nanaimo Centre. So, and you can see that then those 2 years, the bars spiked up, and now they're slowly dropping again as older debt gets paid off. Now, if you compare that as a percentage of expenditures, it's still only around 3% of the total city expenditures. So even though we have a larger debt, it's become sort of a less of a factor overall. Now, compared to other municipalities, so these are a number of similar-sized municipalities, the average per capita in 2008 was $910 per capita for debt. Nanaimo's that year was $517. So you can see that a number of municipalities have made some very different choices about how they will develop their community. Kelowna and Prince George have chosen to do some long-term borrowing to build facilities, whereas Chilliwack, Langley District, and North Van have chosen other models. So there's no value judgment here. I'm just saying that there's a number of municipalities that are about the same size. Many of them are the same era. Kamloops, Kelowna, Prince George, and Nanaimo all amalgamated in the same years and are similar types of municipalities, and they've taken different routes. So, Your Worship, that's it for the presentation tonight. We will be setting aside time tonight and at all meetings until the budget is passed for the members of the public to come and make presentations to Council on the 2010 to 2014 plan. People do not need to get on the agenda in advance. They can simply show up and take advantage of the time on the agenda. We have a web page with a lot of information on it, including the presentation that you saw tonight and reports from myself, and I think the City Manager's report's on there as well. We have a forum for people to ask questions about the budget, and I'd like to strongly encourage people to ask questions about the budget that can be answered by staff at a technical level. If you have political comments or questions, please direct those to the politicians. The forum is moderated by the staff, and we try to stay out of those kinds of discussions. Or if you want, you can phone our main City Hall and say you have a question about the budget, and they'll refer you to me or to Shannon Graham, who's our budget officer. So that's it for you tonight.
Thanks, Mr. Clements. I think it was a very good presentation. Any questions from Council? Councillor Sherry.
Well, Mr. Chairman, following up on Mr. Clements' indication of inviting the general public to participate and make comments, I received a letter from a senior citizen within our community, unfortunate, is not mobile, especially in this kind of weather in the evening, so he's asked me to read the following letter. The world has experienced severe economic recession. As you are all aware, there has been considerable discussions amongst taxpayers and the media concerning the enormous amount of money which is paid in salaries and benefits to city staff from annual taxation. There are over 100 excluded personnel earning substantial salaries and benefits, and the individual proposes that this group must take a proportional reduction in their salaries and benefits. In addition, there must be an immediate cut in all travel and other expenses. All professional fees should be the responsibility of each individual employee, and we have to recognize reality and not look to Nanaimo taxpayers for continuous property tax increases. Therefore, he is suggesting that those earning in excess of $150,000 take a 15% cut. Those over $100,000 take a 10% cut. Those over $75,000 take 5% cut. And in addition, there should be no salary or other increases for the foreseeable future. That's from one of your senior citizens within the community.
One wasn't given. Okay, any other questions for Mr. Clements from Council? Hearing none, thank you, sir. Good presentation. The next item is the delegations pertaining to agenda items, and I think what we'll do is ask Mr. Barron if you'd like to make a presentation, sir, that we'll defer to your service, military service, and of course your sprightful age. So welcome, sir.
Good evening, Mayor Rattan and City Councillors. I thank you for the privilege of addressing you as briefly as possible. My name is Pat Barron. I'm a co-chairman of the Concerned Citizens Committee, which is a registered society for obvious reasons. My subject this evening is proposed high-rise apartments, 2 of them, on Maffei Sutton Park. Mr. Mayor and Councillors, I'm here to speak on this very important matter of retaining this beautiful park in the public domain, which you reenacted into law, if I may say so, from my homework. The original act, is my understanding, of bylaw 1459, and I have the records here for you, was initially enacted in 1971. And you reenacted it. I'm using the term loosely. On behalf of the Concerned Citizens Committee, I thank you for retaining this beautiful park for the enjoyment of all Nanaimo taxpayers and for the future generations, our children's children. Recently, this council also approved the placing of a limestone plinth, a monument, to officially commemorate the saving, which was 40 years ago, of our beautiful park, Maffeo Sutton Park. It took a long time to have recognition, but I thank this council for having done so. We are deeply grateful. The 14 members who started working in 1969 to save this lovely park were finally recognized on their behalf. We thank you. Today, our taxpayer voters are faced with another problem. If we are to save Maffeo Sutton Park for our future generations, it has been proposed that two 28-story high-rise condominiums be built in that park, or closely adjacent to that park. Many of our citizens, whom I have discussed the matter with in walking along the waterfront, many are appalled. They're surprised. Rightly, they maintain that this act would totally destroy our park. We therefore suggest, Mr. Mayor and Council, that you might give consideration before anything be done on that matter, when it does come up, that two public hearings be held, subject to and followed by a referendum on this very important matter. When I went to school, I had to learn Salus Populi Suprema Est Lex. That was stated by Cicero in 46 BC. The good of the people is the supreme law. I trust I can leave this matter with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barron. Any questions for the delegation? There's one. Before you go, just one second.
And if I may, the records, I hand them to the...
Yes, they'll look after that for you.
Thank you.
Before you leave, though, Mr. Barron, there's a question for you from Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. Good evening, Mr. Barron.
Mr. Barron?
Mr. Barron.
Just stand by one here. We've got a question for you here coming up.
I beg your pardon?
Here's a question from Councillor Patchy, the gentleman on the far end here. He's going to ask a question for you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for your presentation. I want you to know that I agree with you. The reason that we are still talking about the 2.4 acres in Maffeo Sutton Park is because it's connected to the hotel that is supposed to arise at some point in the future for the conference center, and in the first, second and third amended partnerships with various and sundry developers, this 2.4 acre is used as an incentive to build the hotel. I can tell you that this councillor will not vote for any hotel should it come along if that 2.4 acres is part of the equation, and I wanted you to know that.
Thank you for the information.
Okay, no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Barron.
We were seated in the delegation.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you again, sir.
Thank you very much.
The next delegation is the Nanaimo Poultry Collective regarding the correspondence item 16A, suggesting changes to city bylaws. And You're both making the presentation, are you?
Is that all right?
Yeah.
All right.
Welcome, sir.
Very much.
When you get started, you'll have up to 10 minutes once we get operational.
All right. Good evening, Your Worship, members of council, citizens and staff of the City of Nanaimo, and with acknowledgement to the Snuneymuxw First Nations. My name is Jesse Schroeder. I've been asked to present to you today a number of different items. Essentially, what we're going to be asking for today is an amendment to Bylaw 4923, specifically Section 8, in regards to the harboring and rearing of poultry on parcels of land of an area of less than 1 acre. Before we get into the serious stuff, I know that your time is valuable, but we have a very important citizen here, Zoel Quigg, who would like to make a short presentation at the beginning here. Go ahead. You can probably just stand up. Go ahead, speak to the microphone.
Hello, my name is Zoel, and I'm going to show you my egg flour power lathe today.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
You can just hand that over there. You done? All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, she did well.
Thank you. So this evening I present to you a specific request to amend City of Nanaimo Bylaw 4923, specifically Section 8. And I will present to you this evening evidence in the form of petitions and letters of widespread support of the rearing of poultry on smaller city lots. And I will also present to you this evening materials and resources that can provide further answers to your questions and concerns regarding the rearing of poultry on small city lots. So this is the City of Nanaimo Official Community Plan, 2008, Part C, Section 3.4. I'm sure all of you have a copy and are well versed in it, and you read these every day. If by chance you don't remember the specifics, there's a few highlights in here that I'd like to point out. Thanks, Jim. In the OCP, Section 3.4, there's a number of observations in regards to the current situation, or the situation as in 2008, regarding food in the City of Nanaimo. One of these observations, or the highlights, are that access to local healthy food is a major concern for all residents. And I think many of us here have eaten eggs, or understand that eggs are definitely a local healthy food that can be accessed by all residents. In addition, where the food is grown and the distances traveled for distribution were major observations. As well, it was observed that a sustainable food system will generate positive economic activity and ensure equitable delivery to residents, and increase the well-being of the community and surrounding area. Now, out of this OCP, there were a number of objectives outlined. Firstly, to develop sustainable local food systems. The rearing of poultry can be easily identified as a sustainable local food system. And also to encourage partnerships for food security. Now, this includes encouraging the creation, provision, and distribution of food products. And again, it's the creation and distribution of food products that's really of concern to us, and what we're asking Council to bring their bylaws, our bylaws, into congruence with these objectives. And again, to ensure access to food. This is considered a universal concern to all citizens, and not just food, but it's outlined in here, nutritious food products. And that's a great distinction. The ability to control the production of food leads one to be able to control locally the nutritious value of the food products. So, again, there were a number of policies that have been identified to be developed, and we're hoping that the amendment of this bylaw 4923 Section 8 will lead to the harmonization of these policies with our bylaws. So within the policies, there is a couple of highlights. I'm going to flip through a few of these things because it's quite a long document to go over this evening. But essentially, areas of highlights include improvement of the access to healthy and affordable foods, supporting the development of urban agriculture throughout the city. And again, urban agriculture, and essentially that's what we're looking at today, is agriculture on urban city lots smaller than 1 acre, which is essentially the restriction in bylaw 4923 section 8. Again, an understanding among business, political, and community leaders about the principles of food security. I think that this document is in itself evidence that there is an understanding amongst business, political, and community leaders, and we're hoping to actually implement some action upon that understanding. So in terms of the background of this bylaw, I'm not privy to the exact details as to why this bylaw was enacted in the first place. I'm sure that city staff and your archives will have much better evidence than what I could speculate upon today. However, the OCP is quite clear in identifying some of the shortfalls in our local food supply systems. Now, without going into an exact number, it is very obvious to many policymakers that the percentage of food that we're producing here on Vancouver Island is not a secure level, and we're looking at about 90% of our food being imported at this stage. The idea is to amend this bylaw to allow for more of that food to be produced here locally and for that quality level to be controlled here locally. So a nice picture of Nanaimo, and of course where we get our food from primarily is the BC Ferry system. We've all sort of been well, hey, I mean, we could all produce our own eggs, or bring them with us on the ferry, if we don't prepare in time, we get stuck with their breakfast, right? So,
well, remember that comment wasn't necessarily the feeling of council, but.
Again, the city of Nanaimo, as it stands now, above 1 acre, there is no restriction on the amount of livestock, rabbits or poultry. And in fact, the landscape of Nanaimo is dotted with 1 acre lots and above and smaller city lots. And there's many nodes to Nanaimo, and many of these nodes basically reach into the semi-rural areas. So we've got many of these parcels, as you can see, just by one sample section of the downtown, that would basically qualify here as under 1 acre and as potential areas of agricultural production. And here you'll see a photograph of an example. This is a third of an acre lot that is currently producing fruit, nuts, vegetables, grain, and clandestinely poultry. So, I know, it's absurd. Obviously the climate is there when we're discussing this. I mean, many cities have made similar allowances, and so I don't think that we're talking about major objections. I would just like to present this in a form that assists the council in making this an initiative and just getting through this, what seems to be a fairly low risk and high benefit option. So again, this is an example of rearing poultry as a secure, affordable local food system. Also, in addition to this, as it stands, many community members have been keeping poultry on parcels of land within the Nanaimo city limits that have an area of less than 1 acre. And I know this is shocking, as Jim was shocked earlier, but yes, in fact, here there's an example of some of our criminals right here.
Well, I'm glad you hid the faces. We'll never see who they are.
Protection. We have to protect these people. So, you like that one? Should we go back? We've only got 10 minutes.
No, please.
Okay. So
you've got about 70 seconds. So, you may want to focus at this point.
So the city's taken no apparent action to enforce this, and so basically what we're looking for is this is the existing bylaw 4923 section 8. We're seeking an amendment as follows. Be resolved that poultry be struck from bylaw 4923 section 8 subsection A, and be it further resolved that bylaw 4923 section 8 subsection B read notwithstanding section 8 subsection B. Oh, sorry. And
we'll give you an extra 10 seconds for that.
Be it further resolved that bylaw 4923 section 8 subsection B be renamed bylaw 4923 section 8 subsection C, and be it further resolved that bylaw 4923 section 8 subsection B be replaced with 8B, no person shall keep or harbor more than 10 poultry on a parcel of land that has an area of less than 1 acre. So that will now read this, and if you care to go through that, I can read it out to you. It is in the documentation that I've laid in front of you, and so that's what the suggestion is. And also, in order to bring the fine schedule...
Okay, that's 10 minutes now.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Good, thank you. Before you go, there are some questions, and the first question is from Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Jesse, for a very good presentation.
Thank you, sir.
I happen to agree with you that the keeping of 4 hens for female chickens on lots smaller than 1 acre is being done on almost every corner of the earth, so I don't see any reason why it should not be done here. I have to tell you, though, I was a little surprised, and I had not given any thoughts to you including ducks as well.
Certainly. And the duck owners will be happy to hear that you're including ducks within poultry. I know that chickens tend to dominate the discussion, but certainly
I'm still thinking about the ducks. But in general, I do agree with your proposal. You realize that we as a council are going to have to do our homework?
Absolutely, sir.
And so at some point, and I can do it now, Your Worship, if you like, or I can wait till after anybody else has spoken, but I do want to make a motion that we refer this to staff.
We'll come back.
In order to give us a report as to the possibilities of this.
Thank you, sir. Also included was a list of resources in order to further answer some of those questions.
Councillor Sherry.
To you, Mr. Chairman, first of all, I'm sorry I missed your address.
Oh, it is number 26847 Howard Avenue, Nanaimo, British Columbia, sir.
Okay, Howard, okay.
He has to link me to my person.
The other thing is now you start off with one set of information, such as 4 or 5. Now we're seeing we're up at 10 and 12. Now, I think you have some difficulty there, stretching the deal. You want to. The other question that I ask is these, lack of better words, chicken coops. Where on the lot do you propose to locate those?
Those are excellent questions. And to address the first one, in terms of the construction of chicken coops, just give me 1 second. Or in terms of the numbers of chickens, there's a great variety in various cities as to the number and as to how they choose to regulate this. We've chosen to offer a suggestion of 10. However, the density problem and the issue of chickens varies. So in Victoria, there's a very large number that is allowed. I certainly recommend that council and staff seek recommendations from other cities in terms of this number. However, when we're looking at the problems that may be associated with it, such as the coops, there are other bylaws or regulations that can take care of those particular issues. For instance, in terms of your building codes, that may be an area that would be affected or may need some adjustment in addition to this bylaw to consider the construction of chicken coops. However, I don't think that the construction of chicken coops itself and whether or not that's done properly should mean that all chickens are not allowed on a property of less than 1 acre. So in terms of the questions about the safety of the chickens and about the construction of the coop, I would refer that to perhaps your building inspector or create a bylaw, something along that line.
The Poultry Collective Group is really willing to provide education.
Well, I'm sorry to the delegation is that unfortunate some of the poultry people do not consider their next door neighbor.
Certainly, sir.
And they locate the coops right under, on the side yard, right under the main, one of the kitchen areas, which is where some of these people spend most of their day. And in the summertime in particular, with the flies and that, so that's why I say that there has to be some consideration, serious consideration, as to location there. And these are some of the problems that previous councils had to deal with. You start off with 4 chickens, you got 12 chickens, next thing you got 50 chickens. And the other thing is, where you're mentioning rabbits and that, where are you going to end the scenario with goats and sheep and pigs.
Just give me one second. So in order to address that, it's important to remember that on parcels of land of greater than 1 acre, there's currently no restriction on the amount of livestock, rabbits, or poultry.
Yeah,
that
we're
can be
dealing
kept.
with sizes smaller than 1 acre by your definition.
That's right. So those same problems are able to persist currently in terms of a poorly constructed coop, in terms of the numbers of birds, in terms of any noise, smell, disease, any sorts of risks are currently being borne by the city on parcels of land greater than 1 acre. And so you would know better in terms of the amount of complaints, the severity of the complaints, but I would argue that those would be statistical outliers, and those sorts of externalities will happen with all human activities, and it's impossible to account for all externalities with words, because as we all know, you can come up with another regulation, but if somebody is really determined on running a poorly run farm or any enterprise, they will continue to do so. So I don't think that specific regulations will safeguard necessarily against all.
Yeah, 3 more councillors that want to ask you questions. So, sorry, ma'am. The delegation was 1 person, okay? And you've already used the 10 minutes up, and now we're trying to get some questions from the council, okay? Councillor Kipp.
I'd just like to say thank you very much to the delegation. I absolutely think you've done your homework. It is in our official community plan. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's in our OCP that we don't live to a lot of times. I wish we would live closer to it. The problem talks about rats and things like that.
Certainly.
And I know that, and they exist in our city today. I absolutely support what you're doing. I think the idea of, we don't want ostriches in the yard next door, don't want a bunch of goats on the roof and a small piece of property, but I think the Poultry Collective has really looked at this and done their homework, and I hope this can go forward to staff and that they can assist staff in us stepping forward into this back to the future type of farming and agriculture. Thank you.
Councillor Holden.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I also am pleased to receive your delegation. It reminds me of growing up in North Burnaby on about 1/3 of an acre lot right on East Hastings Street, and we had chickens in the backyard in the 50s during that time. There's about half a dozen of them. One day they mysteriously disappeared and joined another group of white leghorns about a block away, so I'm not sure exactly what happened there, but they were subject of great delight to my family when we had them. But times have changed, and for some reason we moved away from all that, and I think it's time that we did reconsider how we can accommodate that kind of cultivation on our city lots. I have a question to ask you because a similar matter came up a couple of years ago regarding miniature goats being used to control overgrown lots. And council at that time did not see fit to proceed with that. But I was wondering what your opinion would be on other animals as well as poultry.
Well, I think that the nature of change is that it happens quite rapidly, and unfortunately by the time we get the information and are able to make policies, oftentimes things have progressed quite fast. What we're looking at overall, and if you look at the economic trends, is that food prices are rising, and the ability to control the sources of your food is more and more difficult. And culturally, you'll see that many people are embracing cultivation of many different forms, whether be plants or other agricultural animals. And I think it's a great hedge. I think, if we're talking numbers, right now we're looking at, due to the last presentation, we're looking at increases in tax rates, right? And we're looking for increased service levels. And, if we're going to be asking more from the people, from their land, we need to make allowances for people to be able to make more from their land and to offset some of the costs. We can all appreciate, reducing the amount of our costs and increasing our quality of life. And I think animal husbandry as well as proper urban agriculture and permaculture it leads to a better purchasing power parity, because more of your goods are supplied locally, so your need to trade internationally is reduced. Your demand for international goods is reduced, and therefore you can get a better price for your product.
So you're saying you're primarily interested in the food animals, then?
Well, economically, it just makes sense that we would be producing as much as we can here, including all those other animals.
We've got one more delegation. I was just going to ask you a question myself. When you're talking about chickens, that in the scenario you've given, if there was, say, 4, 6, 8 chickens, are you suggesting that be allowed an equal number of ducks and some of the other poultry, or?
Absolutely, sir. Yes, I think that poultry in all areas is an excellent source of protein. And when we're identifying...
Okay, I'm not suggesting it isn't. Councillor Johnston.
It does, yes, sir.
Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Jesse, for your presentation.
You're welcome.
The Poultry Collective are obviously responsible keepers of chickens, but what happens, Jesse, to less responsible people that decide to keep chickens for the fresh eggs, and when a chicken stops laying, are they going to have these chickens euthanized? Are they going to put them? Are they going to just let them loose to run around the?
Right. So you're looking for allowances for disposal. Now there is a willingness from the collective's
they might eat them.
position to organize systems for such disposal. One of the best opportunities that we have is the rendering companies that are currently in the business of taking waste animal parts and grease and turning that into cosmetic products and other things. So a relationship could be developed with the rendering companies, for instance, and a bin provided for chickens that are no longer living or need to be disposed of. And, you know, in terms of the logistics of that, that would be certainly something that the Poultry Collective would be willing to work with you on. And I think there's many opportunities for private businesses to also receive some benefits from the externality.
Yeah, because I can foresee a real problem of chickens being let loose when they no longer lay. So.
Yeah, and you know, it's important to address, Diane, that we can't make people responsible, right? I mean, that's the whole idea behind the bylaws, and we're just looking for a marginally better way to allow those benefits to be realized and to reduce the risk of potential costs. And I agree that is a potential cost. The idea is to basically minimize that through education, through the development of larger groups who are able to provide these sorts of services, and also to work through some of these logistical problems as they arrive. And I think that at this point in time in the social climate, you have the opportunity to be able to work through these problems and see the support not only from the community and from private businesses, but also within the staff and council in order to implement some of these and address some of these potential problems. Sorry.
Thank you, Jesse.
Not yet. Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to move then that we refer this request from the Nanaimo Poultry Collective to review bylaw number 4923 to see and advise council on the feasibility of holding no more than 4 hens or 4 ducks on a city lot smaller than 1 acre. And I so move.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Is that discussion or are you voting? Push the button. Okay, it's been moved and seconded on the floor for discussion, and now Councillor Hold'em.
I'm just wondering if the mover would consider, or would I understand the motion to mean a general review of that bylaw and not consider only poultry, but other domestic animals?
It was intended to stick with here.
Okay, well, Your Worship, I can support that, but I think we might want to broaden the whole question in the future. I know other municipalities are considering other forms of domestic animals as well. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I recognize the importance of this because actually I think we've allowed more time than we did for Mr. Clements to do his financial report.
Okay.
It's been moved and seconded, so we'll call for a vote. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Sherry, sorry. I'm sorry about that. Go ahead.
My button, Mr. Chairman. I mean, if we're going to throw open this whole bylaw and look at domestic animals per se, and all poultry and everything like that. I guess I've been on the block too long, and the problems that's been brought up in the past, and the way the economy is going, not only for the food and vegetables within the own property, but then you start hiring people for bylaws and enforcement and the cost of administration of it. Mr. Chairman, I can't support that at this time because if we already have it, those properties over an acre or greater are allowed to have that. And there's people within this community that have suffered from the past as to people abusing what's allowed on not 1 acre lots, but less than a third of an acre, and some of them are a quarter acre. The concerns that were before. And I just can't see going down that road again.
Okay. Councillor Padgett, could you read your message, the motion again? Or does we want staff to do that? Maybe Ms. Harrison, could you I want to try to separate the ducks and the chickens on this one.
Okay, I'm hoping I've captured this. That they refer this to staff for a report regarding the keeping of no more than 4 hens or 4 ducks or other domestic animals on properties less than 1 acre.
Okay. Question. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? I see Councillor Sherry and Councillor Unger opposed. Balance of council in favor. The motion passes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
That's right. Okay. Thank you, sir. That was worthwhile. Where's that cute little girl that was making the presentation too? There she is. She did a great job. In fact, I think she sold everyone on it. So that. Yeah, high five. Okay, the next delegation is School District number 68, Trustee Nelson Allen, regarding correspondence item 16B, requesting the council consider appointing 2 or 3 council members and staff to meet with the SD 68 Facilities Planning Committee to explore issues of community cooperation. Welcome, sir. You've got up to 10 minutes.
Thank you, Your Worship. And Your Worship, members of council, staff, and members of the public. First of all, on behalf of the Board of Education of Nanaimo Ladysmith, I'd like to, although it's the anniversary of your election, I'd like to congratulate all of you for running and being elected to City Council. And it's been an interesting year, as it has been on the school board. And I'm sure we're all looking forward to a quieter year this coming year. I'd like to start off by giving you, I figure out how this thing works, a little bit of background on School District 68, some facts. The school district covers, Nanaimo Ladysmith covers Nanaimo Ladysmith, Lancefield, Cedar, and Gabriel Island. We have currently approximately 15,030 students. We have 40 schools, plus a number of specialized programs. And some facts, we have an operating budget of about $122 million a year and a payroll of more than $100 million per year. And we are one of the largest employers in the region, 1,420 full-time equivalent employees. That works out to about 2,000 individuals. And we're one of the largest landowners in the region, about 180 hectares of property. Now, we have 31 elementary schools, 7 secondary schools in the district, and we have one each of a junior and a senior learning alternative school, where we're able to capture those students who need a different approach to education. Very, very quickly, some joint use history between the city of Nanaimo and the Nanaimo Ladysmith School District. There have been, this is my 16th year on the school board, and in that time I think we've had 3 or 4 attempts, joint meetings and so on, over the last 15 years to start a dialogue on a higher level of cooperation with the city. And we've had some limited cooperation in the use of facilities. For example, some buildings are jointly used to some degree or other. We have some joint recreational space. We have some shared space. And but we have had some attempts to provide some more access for our citizens and for the taxpayers. Now, we have a long-term facilities plan that the district has been working on since February, actually, and that is a framework for public discussion. The framework is coming to a special meeting of the board tomorrow night, 7 p.m., and we're seeking more public feedback on that framework. That long-term plan is going to take a look at the next 10 or 15 years, and we'll need some policy input from City Council on community priorities related to that plan. So we invite you as a council to participate in that.
Excuse me, Mr. Allen, just for clarification, you're suggesting we give you some input for tomorrow night's meeting for 7 p.m.?
Oh, no. I meant I should clarify that the framework is going to go out for approved by the board tomorrow. The material and the reports will all go online the next day. And then we're asking the public to give us some feedback, primarily online, although they can do it if they wish in letters or in delegations at some point. We expect that process for feedback will run from about the 25th of November to about January the 16th, with the Christmas season that's coming up. No, there'll be plenty of opportunity, Your Worship, for the Council to have an opportunity to make a formal presentation if they so wish. Now, I'd like to mention on the community schools, which is a form of expanded joint use, we have the Harewood family of community schools, which is NDSS, Fairview Elementary, George Avenue Elementary, and John Barsby Secondary. Outside of the city, we have Cedar Community Schools, which is made up of Cedar Secondary and North Cedar Elementary. I'd like to give you a recent quote from Premier Campbell, who said, "This government has a vision for education in BC where schools and community organizations can create neighborhoods of learning where people can access education and community services under one roof. Schools throughout the province will be able to adopt this model in the future to best meet the needs of their students and communities." Now, we have had a form of quote-unquote neighborhoods of learning in this community. We have something that complements that with our local experience, for example, a cooperation between the city and the school district in the location and building of the Nanaimo Aquatic Centre, the support of community schools, and we've had a high degree of cooperation with the Regional District of Nanaimo in establishing recreational opportunities with electoral areas. Gabriola and Cedar and Electoral Area A as two examples. Now, government policy requires boards of education to consider the needs of all students in our district, including Francophone students and students attending independent schools, and also that we need to broadly consult with education and community partners about the best use of space available for community use. So I have a recommendation from the board that Council consider to establish an ad hoc committee comprised of 2 or 3 councillors and appropriate staff to meet with our Facilities Planning Committee, which is responsible to the board for joint use discussions, to engage in preliminary discussions as to what we can do to develop an outline of a plan to deliver enhanced opportunities for students, parents, and service providers that would help to stimulate the social, emotional, and economic health of our community. And I did have at the front end of that, but I guess I think that was all. So, Your Worship, if there's any questions.
Yeah, there are. Councillor Unger.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Allen, for the presentation. I think it's a good idea to meet in this way. However, we've tried this a number of times in the past, and I know I was on one of the groups that met with the school board at your offices, and then we never heard again from them. I'm also interested that you mentioned the community schools, but we seem to be stymied every time we want to talk about the use of the Rotary Bowl, then all of a sudden that's not involved. Would that be included in in this type of discussion?
Yes, two parts to your question. The first part, you're quite right. We have had a number of discussions, and then things seem to have stalled up. I don't think that was anybody's fault, in particular the City Council or the school district. I think it was a matter of people being busy, or someone didn't take the lead on moving forward. There may be any variety of reasons. I think now, though, that there's more of an interest in this. I know in the recent election campaign, I, for one, and others had this as an issue. Some members of council supported the idea of joint use, did so publicly, so did some members of the regional board. And I know that the public is very, very interested in finding ways that we can use our facilities and reduce the cost to taxpayers. The second part of your question is that in our long-term facilities plan, the future of Rotary Bowl and all of our other facilities, although there are some leases that are currently underway or have been in the process of applications for renewal. I'm not exactly sure where that is right now, but that needs to be looked at in the larger context. And at the end of the day, the school district has the ultimate say in the disposition of Rotary Bowl and the surrounding area. We have also sent a letter asking VIU to come and chat with us about what they would have in mind for joint use and other areas of cooperation. We've invited them more recently with a letter to join in the discussions also.
And I have one more question. With the recent provincial government history of funding or lack thereof, mainly downloading to local governments, you mentioned cost savings. Is this a way of subsidizing school facilities at the cost of local residential taxpayers?
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't know what the precise answer would be. I can give you a conceptual answer. In other jurisdictions, I don't think that's been the case. I know that Trustee McNabb, myself, and former Trustee Janet Cowling, Andy Laidlaw, and another member of staff, I think 3-4 years ago, we went over to Burnaby and took a look at their experience, where Burnaby's boundaries for the city and the school district are contiguous. They have a joint use that's been underway for about 30 years on the basis of a handshake, and they don't draw lines in the sand or the cement. They have a high level of cooperation, and the costs are, in fact, they've saved money for the taxpayers and have a high degree of support throughout the community. And actually, I think the inverse of result of the answer is the inverse. I think in the communities where we have a higher level of cooperation and integration and we end up providing a better product for our citizens and for sports teams and educational seniors at a lower cost for everybody.
Thank you. Mr. Allen, just a question I have, and then we have 4 more councillors with questions for you. But who has the ultimate decision as to the use of the school facilities? Is it the school board or the principal of the particular school in question?
Well, that's a good question. Actually, at the end of the day, the school district is in charge of everything.
Okay. Councillor Holden.
Well, thank you, Your Worship, and nice to see you here, Mr. Allen.
Thank you.
You and I served on the previous liaison committee, I think,
yes.
Together some time ago.
Right.
And I would certainly be interested in reestablishing that committee so that we can look at issues including this, but also in the context of our fairly recently adopted official community plan, which can receive amendments every year, actually. So if there's anything that the school district would see as happening within the community that would affect schools and could be expressed in that venue, that would be good to hear as well. But in any event, I would just ask your opinion about that. If reestablishing that committee, which had an equal number of trustees and city councillors and supporting staff, if that would fulfill this purpose.
In the context of the official community plan?
No, I mentioned that as
the other
simply
one.
a broader
Yes.
issue, but would that encompass what you're talking about in terms of facilities?
Yes, it could take a variety of forms, but I think a reestablishment of a committee like that, the point that we're trying to make is that we need obviously to have our staff involved, but we also have to determine the level of political will on behalf of the elected representatives.
Yes.
And I think you need to have something that is joint so that it can move along with staff support. And you mentioned the official community plan, and I must say that I don't know, maybe we have, I have the impression we have less staff than you have, but that's probably because they have a lot of work to do. We do different kinds of work. But clearly, I think we need to be able to kind of clean up our act a bit too, in terms of being aware of some of the items that happen in the community. For example, I mentioned the Economic Development Group at the last meeting, that the school district really needs to be more involved in a partner, a stakeholder in this community in developing long-term economic outcomes, and the role of the school as a center of the neighborhood, and the economic impact and the quality of life in our community. And I don't think that we've done enough work on our side to come forward and participate more actively with the policymakers like yourself. And I think this board will be very happy to establish that relationship.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Allen, just a quick question as well, and then there's still some more. Tonight, are you here on your own as an individual representative, or are you actually here representing the school board itself?
No, I'm here representing officially the board, and the item, the board chair has in a letter later in the agenda, which has been authorized by the board, as has my representation here. I could at some point come as an individual, but I'd be quite happy to talk about that too. Possibly but I'm not. Here representing the board.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Mr. Allen. You articulated one of the points that I wish to make, but I'm delighted to learn that you've extended an invitation to VIU to participate as well. I think you're probably absolutely correct and accurate in that the previous workings of the joint relationship hasn't been terribly successful, regardless of for who was to participating at the time. But in moving forward, if we don't take, and I appreciate the fact that you're here to publicly make the invitation to reestablish hopefully a relationship moving forward and with this initiative, and I'm certainly 100% supportive behind it, and with this joint working group, and I would certainly welcome the opportunity to sit as one of the members if the opportunity extends itself. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Councillor Kipp.
Thank you, Worship. Mr. Allen, are you aware of section 3.4 of our OCP? That's the one on food security. Right before that is 3.3. And it talks about objectives to provide new and expanding schools to meet the challenges of declining school enrollment, to integrate education and community needs. It's built into our OCP with 7 policies. Mm-hmm. The community is struck based on these objectives of our OCP, and I said before, there's lots of stuff in our OCP that we don't always live to. This would be a good one to start to live to, and a joint use committee would be phenomenal based on some of this right in our OCP.
Right. I think that's a very good point, Councillor Kipp. And while the statement there at the moment talks about declining enrollment, the figures indicate that that's going to be turning around by about 2014 and climbing in the other direction. So we need to be flexible in terms of planning for the future.
Maybe my question to Councillor Kipp, were you not on a committee previously?
Yeah, actually I was. And another follow-up on that, this last weekend at an accessibility workshop, we did hear from a Saanich councillor that integrated a school program with a youth drop-in center, the school, and a program for elderly from over 55, and they joint use together. It's been a phenomenally successful package. And I think shared use and shared cost. I agree with Councillor Unger, though. We can't afford a bunch of downloading without understanding what's going on. And built into OCP is the relationship.
Well, yes, you're absolutely right. And those examples that you quoted, Saanich and Sooke, and the conversion of Colquitt's former junior high to a middle school, and a provision for seniors, and the way they divided the whole area up, they have night access. They have no security problems, and they have seniors, students in the community using that facility, and as I understand it, with the contributions that are made to make that work, there's no downloading. And I think that the idea of downloading needs to be discussed in a committee at the committee level to make a determination how this would work. This would be a major undertaking, but it would be in the best interest, I believe, of the community. Other communities have done this. We've done it to some extent here, but I think we have a wonderful opportunity now to put this together and move forward. And if it takes a couple of years to get it established, we have excellent staff here and at the school board, and with other groups in the community, I think we can put something together.
Follow up? Do you allow chickens on school board property? As one of the biggest property owners?
Councillor Patchy.
Well, actually, Your Worship, I think at the school board, most of the time, it's just chickens coming home to roost.
Okay. Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. Trustee Allen, it was mentioned in the media about a week ago that School District 68 is possibly going into the business of paid parking on your property and among other places, I imagine the downtown area. And you know we have huge parking issues ourselves, and we're still not finished with the parking strategy. Would that be an area where you'd be willing to collaborate and to cooperate with the city?
Well, there are some areas, I think some current discussions that are taking place. For example, the Selby Street property, which we have an interest in working with the city and other groups to develop that property. And there is some parking. I think your staff are working on a parking strategy for that area in cooperation with the school district. Anytime you talk about paid parking for employee groups, you can imagine the kind of response that you get. That is something that came up some time ago and wasn't proceeded with. But Councillor Kipp mentioned a number of times, others, Councillor Unger, about downloading. We also are the recipients of a tremendous amount of downloading. I think the figures are in the last 10 years, we've actually been underfunded to the tune of $20 million. And so that's a major dislocation. And so it's a new world, and we need to be able to look at doing things differently.
But the purpose of me asking you this question to you is that whatever it is that School District 68 is going to do in the way of paid parking, that has to mash one way or the other with what the city is doing. That has to be a cooperation.
Yes, I think that should be on the table and part of the discussions. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Allen, for your presentation.
Right.
This is not a new concept, a new idea of sharing facilities. As in early 1960s, I worked for the City of Calgary Parks and Recreation as a community planner, or parks planner, and all of our events were taking place in the schools in the evenings, so I'm glad to see we're starting to talk again. And a BCRPA conference this past week, they were talking about the aging infrastructure, aging facilities, and the average age of our 65% of the recreation facilities in the province of BC are over the age of 35 years. So it's timely that we start talking about the sharing of facilities, and I hope it goes forward.
Thank you. And you brought up a good example about Alberta and the other parts of British Columbia. But Alberta's had a very, very progressive policy over the years where they build their modules, as you know, of schools and community centres are integrated from the get-go. And we do things differently in British Columbia. I guess it's the independent spirit we have here and a lesser degree of cooperation because we're also independent. But I think we need to be able to change that somewhat.
Right. Thank you.
Councillor Oldham.
Move receipt of the delegation with thanks.
Second. Moved and all in favour? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Mr. Allen.
And if I could just act on that, I'd move that Mayor and Council re-establish a joint use liaison committee with the Board of Education to discuss matters of mutual concern.
We have a meeting tomorrow to determine and discuss committees, that might be appropriate.
That would be an appropriate time to bring that up.
I would move my motion.
Thank you.
Okay.
You can refer it if you want.
Nope, that's fine. It's moved and seconded. No, he is moving it, I believe. But Councillor Holden, you're continued.
On the motion.
Question.
Did you second it? Okay. Question on the motion. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, we're going to now move into the next delegation, Mr. Douglas McBride. Mr. McBride, welcome, sir. You have up to 10 minutes.
Well, I'd say maybe an hour. Everybody else has.
Thank you, Your Worship and councillors. I really have one objective here tonight, and that's to explain to you why we have this dispute, it's escalating, and why we're not going to go away. So I'm going to start by referring to the graphic that I have prepared, and what we have here, I brought this time for myself to see if I could get it. This is Garner Crescent, decreasing from the west to Wakesaya. Here's Wakesaya. It slopes down. This is Buttertubs at this end, and the road that's proposed that is partially built now along the bottom of this bank is Menzies Ridge, I think. It rises from Buttertubs to where it will hit Wakesaya. Insight uses the word bank to mean this thing here. That's a cross section. It uses the word ridge in naming its road below. I accept those terms. I think they accurately describe it. So what I've done is a graphic here to put onto the map to show you what the issue is. If we build a 3.5-story structure down here, 42.5 feet, which is Insight's request, there is no problem. Bill Benson up here probably isn't even going to know this thing is below him. If we take it from this end and we walk it down to Wakesaya and we put it behind, in front of Ray Porter's property, which is on Wakesaya, he's going to have a structure that's 42.5 feet into the air. Now, Insight's current proposal before you does not go all the way down. We're left with the big question. Where we say there's a transition is somewhere around in here. What I put up on the bottom here is Garner Crescent along to 185, which is my house. So in other words, all the way along here, we're not complaining. But from that point to the east of my property, right to Wakesaya, we say 42.5 feet is not fair. So what do we do about it? And I'll take you to my submission, which I've handed to you in terms of the residents' response. I want to show you how we've attempted to work this out. On October 18th, I said to Insight, would you please take another look at your proposed plans to see whether you could accept less than your proposed 42 feet for these few lots. That's lots 18 through 21. On October 26, when I appeared before council before, I stated if Insight has concrete proposals for these specific lots such that it wishes a height variation, it should share them with city staff and us, and it might be we would not then object to its proposals. On November 5th, I suggested as a way to resolve this dispute, well, we'll split the difference. Say they want 15 feet, we'll go with 7.5. Neither party getting exactly what they want. On November 6th, I informed Insight, move the houses forward as you wish, reduce them some in height, assist in landscaping the couple of lots above that are so impacted by this, and Insight has a green light. And to boot is seen to be taking into account the concerns of the surrounding neighborhood. So I have one further proposal tonight, and I can assure you there's not another one coming. And my suggestion tonight is within a height variation of not more than 10 feet. Now what that means is we're dropping down from the 7.5 feet, splitting the difference, and we're saying take 5 feet off the 42.5. It's only for these lots that are impacted. Now we further say, if Insight gives us its detailed house requirements that it wants on these lots in order to maximize its profit, we'll assemble a team that will substantially meet them. We don't currently employ a design team, but we'll assemble one. We don't believe that a competent design team that has been given this parameter on these 4 lots cannot come up and meet most of their requirements in terms of the bottom line. Now, Insight has framed this dispute as one of either or. We don't see it that way. We say the amount of compromise on this project in order to arrive at a solution short of litigation is minuscule. They put it to us that in the last meeting that we had with city staff and Insight, they stated either it gets the proposed DVAP on height variation, it's 42.5 feet on these lots, among others, or it will not register the restrictive covenant protecting the bank below Garner Crescent. That's a pretty hard ball approach to it. And you'll see attached is my letter to the city raising the real possibility that this will progress into litigation against the city, not against Insight. We don't want to go there. I want to just sort of conclude. I have set out what I would ask the action requested today. Staff has recommended in its staff report that the city proceed to give the notice again to the neighbors. And I'm saying, look, don't approve that yet. It may be you're going to have to do that, but don't do it yet. Refer the matter back to staff for further research and consultation. I imagine after the city is formally given the letter tomorrow, they're going to be in consultation with their lawyers. And I imagine Insight is going to be getting their lawyers onto it too. So that's maybe something that could be resolved tomorrow or in the next week or so. But I think you have to look at this and see if what we are saying has a ring of truth to it, a ring of fairness. Because that's going to become an issue, certainly for council. And I think if you feel that we're coming at it with a reasonable approach, then you've got to express a strong preference to Insight that they take the concerns, the reasonable concerns of the residents above into consideration. Now, I have a history of having twice threatened the city with litigation. And this goes back, I have to tell you, a long ways. It's at least 3 decades. On the first one, as we commenced the litigation process, I approached the developer and made him an offer on his land as a means of resolving it. He accepted it, and the neighborhood raised the money to put in the development at the tail end of Emery Way and Garner Crescent. In other words, I'm a reluctant litigator. The The second time that I had to took issue with the city, the Supreme Court upheld my advice, and of course damages were awarded against the city. Please, let's not go there again. There's no need for it. I'll take any questions, Chairman.
Okay, we have a couple. Councillor Patchy first.
Thank you, Worship. Good evening, Mr. McBride. On I think it was the 13th of November, the Mayor, Councillor Unger, and myself, with staff, went to the area in question. And it was pointed out to us that with an RS1 zoning as it is right now, Insight tomorrow could start digging into the bank and put the houses basically where I understand you want them. And so it seemed to make a lot of sense to me that if they stayed away from the bank, because I believe there's some controversy with the covenant on that, even though that really has no influence on the zoning that this council might consider. I was impressed by the way they explained things to me, in that if it goes further towards the street, away from the bank, their graphics show that the actual height, and whichever way you measure that, as we argued about before, it would give a better sight line for the people who live on Garner Crescent. On top of that, I was advised, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we were told that yourself, number 185, and there's no number on this sheet, but it's on the blue sheet, number 57, the lot between 145 and 127, also had no major objections to what Insight was planning to do. I was led to believe that's true.
Let's see, in the staff material, there are the address was which one?
It was 185, your own residence?
Mine, yep.
And the one that's between 145 and 127. There's the lot that it has no number on it. It's sort of facing the other way, away from the four lots below. It's facing more towards Wakesaya.
I don't think there's any lot between 127 and 145.
It shows something here. Well, that being what it is, we were advised by Insight that afternoon that out of the four properties above the ones that we're talking about, that two people remained objecting to what it was that Insight was wanting to do.
That's news to me.
That's news to you?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the final question, Mr. McBride, is on your own graph there where you have the arrow as it is right now. At presently, we are not dealing with anything to the right of that. We're just dealing with the four properties.
No. This is on my best guesstimate. This is on the one over from mine, 165. So that is one of the lots. It's 165, 145, 127.
Okay, so there's the three.
Are the lots above 18 to 21.
Thank you.
I would just mention that both Insight and the city say that there's RS1 on the property and that a building permit could be issued tomorrow. I beg to differ. I've set out my legal opinion on it. That's something your lawyers and theirs are going to want to look at. It's in the attached letter.
Thank you.
Mr. McBride, is it RS1? Is the zoning that?
I think it's RS1 now, and they're bringing on an application for a development variation permit.
Okay. Councillor Sherry.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. McBride, you mentioned a restricted covenant. Is that between the Hawthorne subdivision and the city, or whom is registering that covenant?
I honestly don't know the answer to that, other than it's got nothing to do with us on the Hill. The restrictive covenant was proposed and offered by Insight to protect the bank. We don't want them to go into the bank. Insight doesn't want to go into the bank. I assume the city doesn't want them to go into the bank. That's why there's this restrictive covenant being proposed all against the bank to the toe of the slope to protect it and to make sure, to ensure its stability.
Okay, because my question to staff is, if we are requesting a restricted covenant, as Mr. McBride says, to protect this part of the whichever subdivision it's there, I guess I'm in a quandary as to when there's other restricted covenants on lands within the community that we're not part and parcel of it. But here's the classic example where we're going to get ourselves involved. So I have difficulty in understanding that, and thanks for bringing it to my attention.
Do we have a comment from staff, Mr. Swaby, or who will want
to? Your Worship, through to Councillor Sherry, I'm not exactly sure which covenant the delegation is referring to. So in answer to Councillor Sherry, if it's a building scheme, we would not be dealing with it. If it's a restrictive covenant that's being offered as part of the subdivision on whatever part of the bank is left over, then we would be party to that covenant, and it would be enforced by the city.
Well, as I say, through you, Mr. Chairman, to the appropriate staff, is that we have had discussion over this last term on restrictive covenants, be it building schemes, be whatever. Call it whatever you want. It's a restricted covenant, and there's some paper that would be filed in Victoria against that land. And it's been stated in meetings that it's not the city responsibility to be involved in this. And here I hear, and I don't know whom is leading the parade on this restricted covenant on this piece of property. But if we are starting to get ourselves involved as a community on restricted covenants, then we better review the whole item of restricted covenants. That's all I'm saying.
Your Worship, it's an excellent opportunity to try again to clarify the difference. If it's a building scheme that's registered by a developer, where the subdivision approving officer or the city is not involved, it would not be one that the city would be obligated in any way to enforce. We register restrictive covenants all the time as part of rezoning applications and as part of subdivision applications, in which the city is party to drafting the document and registering it, of which we do enforce as part of the city's bylaw enforcement.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think a couple of my questions have been marginally answered and asked. Question to staff. Thank you very much, Mr. McBride. Is that transition location, as we've seen it on the display board, accurate in terms of your opinion of accuracy relative to the height encumbrance from the people on top?
Your Worship.
No, it's not to scale.
No, well, I realize it's not to scale, but is that transition location estimate where you think, is it accurate in your estimation?
Your Worship, I believe the applicant has provided a number of cross-sections which are to scale as part of their submission. There's no doubt that a house that's built under conventional, without the variance, under the conventional height requirements, as you move closer to Wakasaya, will have an impact on the upper houses. What the applicant is proposing in their submission is to move the houses forward as a way to attempt to minimize the impact on the rear lots on Garner Crescent. The impact is greater as you move towards Wakasaya.
Great, thank you. And Mr. McBride, you mentioned a compromise that I understand and you have expressed to the developer of 37.5 foot height. Now, has that been offered to the, or are you,
That's
before tonight, or is that a tonight?
What I've offered before are all the other ones, including splitting the difference of 7.5 feet. But when I came in here tonight to try and convey why we're excited about this up there, is I thought, and we had a meeting today with the residents, and we said, well, bottom line, 5 feet. We're trying to resolve this. So the developer, I did phone them and advise them this morning as to what I was proposing here. So in that sense, I've given them notice, and I have a copy of my submission here for them this evening. But today is our first go with the 5 feet for those 4 lots. So it would then be 37.5 feet instead of 42.5.
So this is an 11th hour plea, if you will?
Well, it's sort of, you may not appreciate it, but there's basically pending litigation here, and we're trying to head that off. The lawyers are going to be involved in it tomorrow.
Thank you. And just my last question is, and this is a question to staff, and I read through the report about the restrictive covenant, and to me, there either is one or there isn't one. And we've either participated in writing one or not writing one. We've either contemplated having one or not having one. It seems extremely vague to me that we would be talking about a restrictive covenant that might exist with the developer and the neighborhood or somebody else, but not us. And I find that rather difficult to comprehend when we're talking about steep slopes and banks and restrictive covenants and litigation and legal intervention. So is there a restrictive covenant with the city and the developer, with the developer and the neighborhood, or something else?
Thank you, Worship. There is, to my knowledge, no building scheme, which is a private agreement offered between the developer and the future owners of the lots, but we will have no input into that at the end of the day. However, at the end of the subdivision process to create these lots, the city, as we do in most of the North End lots, will be looking to have a covenant which protects the bank through a geotechnical evaluation with the construction of houses. But that won't limit them to not disturbing the slope. That will allow the developer or the homeowner to build a house after it undergoes a geotechnical evaluation to establish whether you can build the house safely and whether there's any mitigation that's needed to deal with the slope afterwards, and whether there's a no-touch zone on the slope. But at this point, that will be a general covenant registered as part of the subdivision.
So in the process, would we not ask them to conduct that geotechnical work to know that we should have a restrictive covenant on this to protect the slope and the city in its potential litigation, or the neighbors, or?
Again, I wasn't clear. I apologize. There will be, as part of the subdivision, a covenant which requires further work with any house that's built on any of the lots along this bank.
Okay, is that clear to you?
Well, actually it isn't, because I reviewed the draft, the geotechnical report today, and although I didn't get into the wording of it because we're not at that stage, it's certainly my understanding that from looking at the schedule that is the aerial photo of it, superimposed with the toe of the slope, that basically what Insight is saying is we're not going to build on the slope, and that's why they're moving, one of the reasons they're moving closer to the curb, which I think is a good idea. So I'm not certain that I have a complete understanding of this restrictive covenant, other than from day one Insight has offered it because it makes sense for them. We liked it because it made sense for us, and it sure makes sense for the city. So I'm in favor of it.
Thank you, Richard. Just finally, so I'm certainly in favor of this development. Has been a wonderfully crafted, planned, comprehensive development. I think it's a fantastic development, and it's a great thing for the city, and I think they've done a wonderful job. We're coming down to a few lots out of hundreds that have some complications. I would hope that there would be reason, and I am certainly in support of moving the units closer to the street. I'm certainly in favor of protecting the slope and the bank. I think it's in everybody's best interest. And the thing that seems to be the stickler is the height. And if there's some manner that there's a resolution on height that doesn't compromise the ability to maximize the return on the developer's investment and the form and character to complement what they've already built there and impact the people that have been neighbors there on the upper side for decades, then I'd like to think that we can accomplish that. I'm all in favor of this project. I'm all in favor of it moving forward. We haven't talked about the one lot with the coach house on it, which I'm in support of, being detached. And I would just like to think that there's a way to make this work with staff, the neighbors, and the developer to everybody's satisfaction.
Okay. Councillor Oldham.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to the delegation, and then I have a motion. If there's no other speakers at the moment. One more speaker, okay. I just want to get this crystal clear. The only lots at issue for you are 18, 19, 20, and 21 of Menzies Ridge Drive. That's it. That's the only thing? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Kipp.
Yes, Your Worship. I still had a problem with actually a lot over on Behringer 809 changing how that was, but I like the coach house idea. When I refer to page 58 in our blue, and I see the cross-sectional views of lot through 127, Garner 145, 165, when I get to the lot first page on 58, it doesn't look like that slope would be that unstable. And I'm concerned why the height would have to. I understand pushing the lot forward and protecting what vegetation is there, but I'm still concerned with that height of a lot in that area. And from what the delegation says, there's no flexibility. Is there no flexibility now? The proponents are here. Can they speak to some of this after?
Not tonight.
No, they can't, can they? Okay, I'm still... like I said, I'm not certain why on these end lots where there is no slope or a really low bank that we have to move these to a height of that height. I have a problem with that.
Okay. Councillor Oldham.
Your Worship, if you're willing to accept a motion.
Yes, I am.
Then I would move that Council proceed with the required statutory notification for development variance permit 148 at 1400 Jinglepot Road, 583 Sarum Rise Way, and 809 Behringer Boulevard, excluding lots 18, 19, 20, and 21 Menzies Ridge Drive, and further that these lots be referred back to staff for review and refinement.
Second motion.
You got a seconder? Okay. Any further discussion? Question. All in favor? Opposed? The motion passes.
Receipt of the delegation.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McBride. We'll certainly be in touch with you in due course, I'm sure. And you've brought some interesting points forward, and we'll certainly look at that. The next delegation is Mr. Fred Taylor, 204 Emery Way, regarding staff report for the cemetery bylaw. Sorry to keep you to the very end, Mr. Taylor, because I know the crowd, by the looks of it, is starting to die off. But anyway, your point was...
They're turning the lights on you.
Thank you.
Mayor Rattan and council members, I speak against bylaw 7084, a bylaw for the operation and maintenance of cemeteries and the interment of other disposition of the dead. Item 3 of the bylaw, I believe, must state all properties for cemetery purpose within the boundaries of the city. Once again, there appears another attempt not to recognize Pioneer Cemetery. That's the cemetery at the corner of Wallace Street and Comox Road. It's not listed. This must stop. The city must ensure this land is officially and legally recognized as a cemetery, which has never been done. And it's one of the oldest in the province. Consider a member of the first city council, John Hurst, remains are here, along with many other noted persons. Does an initiative still exist in this city to pave over an area of this cemetery for a right-hand turn going down from Wallace to Terminal? That was stopped in about year 2000. But nothing's happened with the information going to Victoria about this cemetery existing. Why hasn't the direction of council on May 15, 2000, moved by Councillor Holdem for appropriate commemoration of this cemetery not been followed? And here is the document from 1916 where it came to the city, an old cemetery. It was old then. And yet we still lack sending papers to the province to declare it a cemetery. Why?
Well, is there any comment from anyone on this?
Now, also, what about the small burial ground at St. Peter's Church, where many of the miners killed in the May 1887 mine disaster were laid to rest? It needs historic protection as well, and named in this bylaw, in my opinion. We had a big mine disaster here. We're known for coal mining. They're all laying at rest on the area of the St. Peter's Church property.
Have you spoken to St. Peter's Church concerning that?
Pardon me?
Have you spoken to St. Peter's Church concerning that?
No, it's not my business.
No, I know it's not. I'm just simply asking the question if you have, because I just wondered, they would have to come forward, I think.
What about the several sick persons laid to rest at the corner Wakeside and the Nanaimo Lakes Road? The northeast colliery of Colliery Dam Park. What about all the people laying in that area? Also, please consider in this bylaw, should there be some reference under general regulations, reference to bylaw 4923, licensing and control of animals in regards to dogs in the cemeteries? Shouldn't there be something, if somebody's reading this bylaw, you're going to see there's a reference to it or whatever somewhere that no dogs are allowed in the cemetery at large, etc. We don't have anything like that in this bylaw.
Some humans will be in trouble for that.
I strongly object to section 5.4 of the proposed bylaw, where the holder of an interment right certificate can only transfer to a family member, not offer for sale, must return to the city, may only claim the original fee paid to the city, and it could be in 2 or 3 generations ago where it was $10 or something, you got to give back 10, and then the city turns around and makes money on it, sells it for $900. Come on. Why can't those elderly people or whoever owns those plots gain that few $100s? After all, they've been paying all along in taxes to help maintain property like this. They must return to the city, may only claim the original fee paid to the city without any gain to today's value or interest on the original fee paid to the city thereby gaining the financial value upon resale. Now, I've stood before this council for the last 10 or 15 years asking for a plot. I'm the 3rd generation in this city. For myself, no, you have to die to get one. Well, I said 3rd generation in this city. People can move and live in this city in a week, die, and get a plot in the city. What about people that have been here long term? Where do they have to go? Ladysmith or Duncan or Chemainus, or where do they have to go? Or throw them to sea?
Well, Okay, valid point.
No.
Thank you.
I understand this direction of how you're going to grab back these properties for nothing is not in the Act today. Who's dreaming it up, I don't know. Consider the city back in about 1950 collected names and put them on plots free. No down payment, no payment to date. Free. Even in the Bowen Park one that's filled. I went in the other day and asked, how many's in this state? I said, about 20 left. In fact, the first clerk didn't know what I was talking about. And another one came on and said, there's about 20 reserves still over now 50 years without any payment, no nothing to the city. You're letting certain people hang on to a plot for nothing. Other people paid for it, and if they give it back or want to sell it for somebody else, they've got to give back to you whatever they paid for it 100 years ago or whatever. And yet people can hang on to them free, no down payment, no nothing.
Okay, Councillor Unger, did you have a question?
Yes, if he's through.
No?
I guess you don't have a question.
Consider the city still has approximately 20 plots reserved without any payment for 50 years. Cancel these reserves, which you haven't given any direction about the existence of them since they're given you, which Council of the Day was supposed to, and make them available to the public. A policy should be created with a criteria of residency within the community for any available plot. I encourage you to send this bylaw back to the drawing board. Adoption today never gains the amendment at a later date. I've pointed out to you the Pioneer Cemetery hasn't made it clear yet since 2000. So, how are you going to handle it? I finally found out that the city was being asked to dispose of 3 lots on behalf of somebody that owned them. I found out about it after they'd been asked in the city for 3 years. I bought them.
3 burial plots? And
now I'm going to, well, it's tax-free land. I can put my tent there too.
Good.
The situation like here is I paid the day's value of them at the day, but if you go back in history, would I have to, I only get, if I wanted to turn them back, only get $10 something for them? Like this financial gain to the city is so minor, why you want to do it this manner?
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Unger, then Councillor Bessie.
Yeah, Mr. Taylor, you are a very good researcher and you do a lot of work, it seems, on looking up various things. Have you ever considered that before coming here you talk to staff, because often they could provide the information and or you could provide them with information that would help them inform us, because you like to come here and spring bylaw numbers and technical information on us, and staff could very well supply a lot of that information so that when we get here we can deal with from a basis of knowledge, so we know what is coming. But it seems that we always get, I guess the term is blindsided, because you have done all the research work. You have not allowed staff to have the first shot at it, or often I think a lot of your problems could be solved by staff if you talk to them first.
It depends on how you want to use that information. I've learned in the past it's better to come and address you people. For instance, in 2000, there was Ann Royal, I can name a whole bunch of people, came and stood before council. Unfortunately, you weren't here at that time, but some members of council were, and laid down all the facts, who's buried there, even Pioneer Cemetery, etc., when you're wanting to widen Comox Road. We've been there. How many times do we have to come back and ask and plead?
Go to staff.
Go to staff and go away, eh? No.
Okay, Councillor Beswick.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Mr. Taylor. You rarely disappoint me with the research and the time that you take to take up matters that are of importance not only to you but the balance of the citizens, and I thank you for that.
I thank you too.
I just have a question to staff as it relates to the cemetery on the corner of Comox and Wallace, as it relates to the 2000 motion, which I'm just learning of, which is fine. Who is in possession of that property, and what is its designation for all time?
Mr. Franson.
It's presently in the possession of the city, and it's zoned as parkland.
And so it's registered as parkland, it's registered as a cemetery for infinity?
No, it's not registered as a cemetery.
And then are other cemeteries listed as cemeteries or parkland within the city of Nanaimo?
The way the cemeteries are set up at present, we have 3 cemeteries that are actually registered as cemeteries with the province. Those are the 3 contained within the bylaw.
Is there greater protection for that property registered as parkland or registered as a cemetery?
I would...
Worship, I think that they're different, and I don't know if greater or lesser is the appropriate descriptor. I think Council has made it clear that it wishes to protect parkland, and certainly the Cemeteries Act protects cemeteries, so they're both protected. The property at the corner of Comox and the highway, or Comox and Wallace Drive, that Mr. Taylor is referring to, isn't a registered cemetery. There are some remains there, but it's not. There's no burials taking place there. Several years ago, there was discussion around building a right turn lane from Comox Road to the highway, and Council determined that that was not in the community interest, and there has been no further discussion about that.
Mr. Chairman, there's been no burials at Wellington Cemetery, although it's officially designated cemetery, and is no burials there. Parkland, I don't even recall if this land was in the Parkland bylaw, to be honest with you. If so, I don't believe it's any bylaw to protect it officially as parkland. Therefore, the city can do what they want with it. If it's registered, any attempt by any council in a later day would be stopped by the province. That's why you register it, to officially declare it what it is. And just to put a parkland zoning on it is just buying time. It doesn't protect it.
Okay, Councillor Kipp.
Yes, thank you for your insight and the information you bring forward to Council. It's phenomenal. I appreciate it any time. If we don't recognize our sacred sites in our community, we can't recognize dying, and then we'll actually never live as a culture anyhow. So I really think we have to protect this, and it goes back to the same point. We just got park protection after some 15 years of requesting it, and I absolutely believe that the citizens have to continue to come back to remind us of some of these dates. Like in 2000, if Councillor Holden passed a bylaw, staff is supposed to implement those policies that we pass, and it takes a long time, way too long on parks, way too long on cemeteries. And I think we have to look at this. When they bring forward a bylaw, let's encompass all the land that we believe should sit in that, not just what's convenient, what's status quo. We need to upgrade some of our policies to include all of these lands, and we need to make that as a motion tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Kipp. The city has been asked in the past. I know I can't recall when you were here at the time, but I guess we have to keep coming back to solve the problem.
Okay, Councillor Holden, we have 2 more, Mr. Taylor, before you escape here. There was
through you, Your Worship, does staff see any merit in meeting with Mr. Taylor to review this bylaw, given the information that he's presented tonight, rather than to you ahead of time, which he should have done?
Well, Your Worship, staff are always prepared to meet with Mr. Taylor, and we do on a regular basis. So, yes, we're prepared to meet with Mr. Taylor. Okay. However, the question about whether there should be more properties in the city designated cemetery, that's not a...
implications to that I would urge that you ask for a report on that before you pass a motion to do that.
And secondly, Your Worship, I'm not exactly sure what motion from 2000 Mr. Taylor is referring to, but it was obviously passed by council, so it's not my personal motion after that. But is there any evidence that staff has simply neglected to carry out a direct motion by council?
Not that I'm aware of. Mr. Franson, do you know?
Not that I'm aware of either.
Okay, thank you.
Well, if that's the case, could I see the report that was asked for?
Okay, well, I don't think they'll have it with them right now. Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I agree with you. To my mind, there's something sinister about turning a cemetery into parkland. It doesn't seem right. Now, there is a wall at Comox and Wallace Street where grave markers that must have been standing somewhere have been incorporated in a wall.
They were standing throughout that property.
So when they were standing through that property, it was a proper cemetery then, by your recollection?
Yes, and they were under, almost next to your sidewalk there, some of the people. That's why they couldn't widen the road there for right and turn.
Okay. Is there any value in your mind for this council, if there's such a way after the report comes in, to dedicate this particular spot as a historic site rather than a cemetery?
I think it's both. I think you first have to declare it a cemetery, which it is, and declare it historic because it's one of the earliest ones in the province and of the people there. There's even people there from a particular war that was rare.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, I think it would be in order to make... Okay, is there a second? I got a move and second. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. We can either have a motion or just make a recommendation back to staff to look into this and see if we get a report back on the disposition of those properties.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question, staff?
Sure, you can.
Cemetery Park. Did not parkland is protected by the city?
Go ahead, Dan.
Your Worship, in terms of, I don't believe the corner of the Island Highway, Wallace and Comox, is actually part of the Parks bylaw. That would probably have a residual commercial zone. So that would be something we could report back on. Part of it is definitely road right-of-way. And I'm not sure on the balance whether it's just a lot or how it's actually hooked, what it's hooked to. But it doesn't have the parks dedication as far as I know.
Thank you.
Councillor Sherry.
To you, to staff, Mr. Chairman, is there an immediate need or a rush to start the process on this bylaw this evening?
Your Worship, there are some financial implications. The report is recommending some rate increases, and the implication of not doing it is that they would be delayed. Mr. Franson, do you have any other issues of urgency?
We have to, with the bylaw, we have to put in a date that we would put everything into action with the registrar or the province. If we're going to not do it, then we'd have to establish another date with them.
So actually, the basic reason with the bylaw this evening is to specify rates of services and the dates of implementation. Now, what's happened tonight, there's been other information which was subject to a report that was requested, and that so that still it doesn't pertain to the rates and services, but it pertains to the physical position of naming properties that are considered graveyards or cemeteries in this community. Is that correct?
That's my understanding of what Mr. Taylor has asked for, but yes, this bylaw is primarily about updating the rates and charges.
Okay. I guess, I believe if we looked under the Heritage Registry, that this piece of property at the corner of Wallace Street and Comox Road is identified under the registry as a heritage site. I do have concern when we just got it as a park, and I'm glad to see that we have the property that's located in the old improvement district of Wellington. We have that registered on this piece of property. So I guess what I'm prepared to pass the bylaw for the first, second, and third reading to start it, but I'm still not satisfied with all the pertinent information that was requested and has been reported to have the opportunity to review the report that was requested in 2000 and to adjust. We can amend the bylaw accordingly after that's received.
Okay, Councillor Unger.
Your Worship, that was exactly where I was heading. We can pass the bylaw because bylaws can be amended any time. Now, I would be prepared to move a motion at this time in view of the process reportedly getting lost over a period of years. I move to get a report from staff on all the implications of Mr. Taylor's concerns with regard to unidentified and cemeteries that are other. If I can get a seconder.
Second motion.
Okay, moved and seconded. Get it on the table. Do you want to speak to it now, or that?
No, I think I have.
Okay. Any other comments on this one? Question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. Thank you.
Moving right along now.
Now we'll move into development services. Report of the public hearing held Thursday, 2009, November 5 for bylaws 4000.460, 4000.464, 4000.465, and 6500.006. Staff recommendation that council receive the report and the minutes of the public hearing held Thursday, 2009, November 5, and cover the same bylaws as earlier mentioned.
Who's staff recommendation?
Is there a seconder?
Second motion.
Moved and second. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. City Poundkeeper and Animal Control Services contract staff recommendation that council award the city's Poundkeeper and Animal Control Services contract to Coastal Animal Control Services of BC Limited for a 3-year term commencing 2010 January 01 at an annual cost of $345,000 or $365,000, which includes the services of an additional animal control officer between May 1 and September 30 for increased enforcement in the city's parks and beaches. The request for proposals asked all applicants to include a price for a summer patrol officer. The price was The price was similar from both applicants. Option 2 is recommended to provide a better level of service during the summer months.
Staff recommendation number 2. Second motion.
Okay. It's moved and seconded. Did you have Councillor Bestwick?
A week service for from May till October or whatever. Thank you.
Councillor Padgett.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that since we went through this pretty negative thing of making sure that cats are not being euthanized by way of the gas box, that this particular operator has agreed to continue with the euthanization of cats by way of lethal injection.
My understanding that that's included in the contract and specified in that manner, and we'll ensure that that takes place. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Going into DVP 148, 1400 Jinglepot Road, 583 Sarum Rise Way, and 809 Behringer Boulevard. That one is the covered earlier, I beg your pardon. Okay. Dealing with unsightly premises, 448 Wakesai Avenue. It's requested the council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to unsightly premises at 448 Wakesai Avenue. And the staff's recommendation is that council, pursuant to property maintenance bylaw 1990, number 3704, and amendments thereto, direct the owners of 448 Wakefield Avenue to remove the derelict silver red Nissan truck, automobile parts, hot water tanks, discarded household furniture, wood items, metal debris, and miscellaneous debris from the premises within 14 days, or the work will be undertaken by the city's agents at the owner's cost.
Move the staff recommendation.
No kidding. Second it.
All in favor? We've got to go through it whether we like it or not. Unresolved building deficiencies, notice on title, section 5.7. It is requested council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to unresolved building deficiencies or illegal suites for the properties listed below, and the staff recommendation that council by resolution instruct the Director of Legislative Services to file a bylaw contravention notice respecting the properties listed below at the Land Title and Survey Authority of British Columbia under section 5.7 of the Community Charter. And those ones are, the first one is 4079 Ross Road, illegal construction, finished basement to include a secondary suite. Number 2330 Pheasant Terrace, illegal construction, finished basement to include a secondary suite. Sorry, yeah, on the first one, is anyone here represent that Ross Road, 4079 Ross Road? Anyone in attendance with 2330 Pheasant Terrace? The third one is 2339 Breckenwood Place, illegal construction alterations to include a secondary suite in the basement. Anyone here representing 2339 Breckenwood Place? Okay, sir, come to the microphone. That's 2339 Brackenwood Place. We just need name and address, sir, for the file, please.
William Schmidt, and it's 2339 Brackenwood Place.
Okay. Welcome, sir. Do you have any comments?
I would just like clarification on what this actually means for my residents, because my concern would be it sounds like they think that my house was to be an unfinished basement, which it wasn't. So I'm just wondering what...
Okay, this says that it's considered an illegal construction. There's alterations to include a secondary suite in the basement. Do you have that?
Yes, I do, sir. But my question is just, what does that pertain to? Because the only thing that I would see illegal would be the fact that the stove was put in. Like... What's that?
Your Worship.
Yeah, just
basement suite.
Okay. So what this does is it places a notice on the title in the event the property transfers to notify any prospective purchasers that this illegal construction has taken place. And the reason it's done is to protect the rest of the citizens and taxpayers of the community from any future lawsuits. So this is merely the placing of a notice on the title at this point.
Okay.
Okay, is that any further questions?
I guess so. I just don't.
Did you talk to staff about this?
Well, I didn't get a chance to pick up the information from the city about it. I had talked to I can't.
But somebody at
Ralph, yeah.
Okay.
But no, I just had concern as to what that really means on title of my house, because I don't know. I just don't really understand what it... Like, I understand that it was illegal construction, but nothing was done illegal besides putting the stove cable in, so I was just concerned.
Well, I think part of it is to protect the taxpayers in the community against possible litigation in the future, and secondly, to protect the person that you may ultimately sell the house to, because if they have something that has illegal construction in it, and that's deemed by the city, then it has to be obviously conveyed to the new purchaser, and the best and safest way to do it is put it on title.
Okay, so I guess my other question would be then, if a removal order was, I mean, I either have the option to do the suite up to code or a removal order, so if there was a removal order requested or whatnot, would that be taken off after the removal was done?
Well, maybe, Mr. Seward, do you want to make a comment on this, or someone else in staff?
Yes, Your Worship. At this time, we're not proposing a removal order. We're working with will work with the owner to make sure the secondary suite is safe, and the notice on title would remain on the title, and that would be the end of our dealings with it through council.
Okay, is that some?
Well, I want to know what the alternate would be because the suite is going to be removed. So I would just like to know my options and to what I should or shouldn't be doing.
Okay, well, this probably isn't the best forum for it because we got a lot of staff here, a lot of spectators, a lot of people. Okay. This is the sort of thing we hope that people will take the time to discuss with staff before they come here, and then we can assist you as a court of last resort if it doesn't work out. But I think if you're prepared to remove the structure, then you need to sit down with Mr. Seward or somebody else delegated by Mr. Seward to handle this thing, and then I'm sure there's resolution if you're prepared to work with us. Okay. We'll work with you.
Yeah, for sure. I just didn't have a chance to.
No, that's great.
Real quick. So
but get hold of the city.
Much.
We'll work with you on it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next item is 265 Kennedy Street, illegal construction alterations to include a secondary suite in the basement and close the exterior basement entrance and construct exterior stairs and landings. Anyone here that would like to speak to matters at 265 Kennedy Street? I assume that the gentleman leaving is not having to do with 265 Kennedy?
He's going the wrong way if he wants to.
Good point. Okay, the next item, 5193 Calder Road, illegal construction, finished basement to include a secondary suite. Is there anyone in attendance from 193 Calder Road? The next item is 191 Calder Road, illegal construction, finished basement to include a secondary suite. Is there anyone in attendance from 191 Calder Road? 187 Calder Road, hot bit of activity. It's illegal construction, finished basement to include a secondary suite. Is there anyone here representing 187 Calder Road?
Staff recommendation.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Move into the cemetery bylaw. Now that's been, I think, referred back, has it? Okay. Seconder, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. The water and garbage rate increase bylaws, staff recommendation the council receive the report pertaining to waterworks rate and regulation bylaw, amendment bylaw 2009 number 7004.04, and garbage and recyclables collection bylaw, amendment bylaw 2009 number 7089.01, which are presented under the bylaw section of the agenda.
Second motion.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Information items only?
Second motion.
Moved and seconded. Any discussions on the information items? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Reconsideration of bylaws, and we'll turn that over to Acting Mayor, Councillor Unger.
Thank you, Your Worship. Move that zoning bylaw, amendment bylaw 2009, number 4000.460, 970 and 972 Brecken Road to rezone property from residential duplex zone to residential triplex and quadruplex zone in order to legalize an existing fourplex past third reading.
Second. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, Councillor Beswick opposed. Balance of council in favor? Sorry, I'm sorry. So Councillor Sherry as well as Councillor Beswick opposed.
I move that zoning bylaw amendment bylaw 2009, number 400464 at 635 2nd Street to rezone property from single-family residential zone to single-family small lot zone in order to facilitate a 3-lot subdivision past third reading.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move that zoning bylaw amendment bylaw 2009 number 4000.465 2183 and 2177 Salmon Road to rezone the properties from single-family residential zone to residential duplex zone in order to permit the construction of a duplex on each lot past third reading.
Second motion.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
I move that the official community plan bylaw amendment bylaw 2009 number 6500.06 at 1200 Frew Road, 1560 and 1650 Island Highway South to include the Sandstone Master Plan within the Chase River Neighborhood Plan to permit a comprehensive mixed-use development, pass third reading.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? Councillor Paggi.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I've noticed that Mr. McLennan is in attendance here. I do want to thank him again for his good presentation at the public hearing on November the 13th, I believe it was. And I would also hope that he would convey my thank yous one more time to Mr. Pooney of Brooks and Associates, who went through a lot of difficult questions and answered them rather well. It has not taken away my fears about urban sprawl. And while I know that my utterings on urban sprawl seem to have fallen on deaf ears, if not having run into a brick wall over the years, I want to remind this council and citizens of something that happened in council on March of 2008. It was the time that a man by the name of Frank D'Ambrosio came before council and presented Nanaimo with the wonderful downtown urban design plan and guidelines. And a good plan it is, and a good plan it was then. I want to remind you of the final words that Mr. D'Ambrosio uttered after he had done his very wonderful PowerPoint presentation. And he left council by saying, you realize that none of this, and he's referring to downtown guidelines, will ever come to fruition if you as a council insist on building at the periphery of this municipality. Mr. D'Ambrosio is a well-known architect. He's an urban planner. He sits on the board of directors of Smart Growth BC, which to my mind is still the last word in urban planning. And so with all deference to Mr. McLennan and to Mr. Pooney, I am going to put my bet with Mr. D'Ambrosio, and I shall not be supporting this.
Councillor Oldham.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Sorry.
I think the comments should be answered. I thought that was for a large and comprehensive development such as that, it was the most positive public hearing I've ever attended. And I thought the answer by the developer's representative on the question that Councillor Paggi posed to him about urban sprawl was brilliant. He defined urban sprawl as monolithic, such as all single-family residents, as car-dependent, which we know all about, as development that stretched existing city services. It's interesting that this proposal is for a diverse development that's not monolithic but includes all three classes of residential property, that it's self-contained and not nearly as car-dependent as some of our existing neighborhoods, and that it provides its own services rather than stretching existing city services. So if one listens to that kind of definition, thoughtful definition, rather than just any development that goes outwards, one would say, this isn't urban sprawl. This is a good development, a development that contributes to our community, and I'm proud to be voting for it.
Thank you. Question on the motion. All in favour? Opposed? We have Councillor Sherry and Councillor Paggi opposed. Balance of council in favour. The motion passes. And second?
That official community plan bylaw amendment bylaw 2009 number 6500.06 now be adopted.
Seconded. No discussion. All in favour? Opposed? Councillor Sherry, Councillor Paggi opposed. Balance of council in favour. Motion passes.
I move that Parks, Recreation, Culture Regulation Bylaw Amendment Bylaw 2009 number 7073.01 to amend Schedule A, Hours of Operation, be adopted.
Moved and seconded. All in favour? Opposed? Carried. Introduction of bylaws.
I move that Cemetery Bylaw 7084 to regulate the operation and maintenance of cemeteries and the internment of other disposition of the dead pass first reading.
Second the motion.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move that cemetery bylaw number 7084 pass second reading.
Second motion.
Moved and seconded. In favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move that cemetery bylaw number 7084 pass third reading.
Second motion.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move that waterworks rate and regulation bylaw amendment bylaw 2009 number 7004.04 be given first reading.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move that the waterworks rate and regulation amendment bylaw be given second reading.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move that the same bylaw be given third reading.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move that garbage and recyclable collection bylaw amendment bylaw 2009 number 7089.01 be given first reading.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Move that the garbage and recyclable collection bylaw be given second reading.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move that the garbage and recyclables collection bylaw be given third reading.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Introduction of development bylaws. There's none. We're moving into correspondence.
Move receipt of the letters.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Other business, Local Government Leadership Academy Forum. Memo from the Local Government Leadership Academy, LGLA, advising that the province-wide forum to be held in Richmond, BC on June 16, June 18 of 2010. Okay, Councillor Holden.
I'd move that Council approve the expenses of any council member wishing to attend.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Councillor Unger.
Yes, I attended a number of these in my first term, and they were extremely valuable, and I think it would be a very good idea for a very small cost for council members to attend them.
Thank you. Councillor Padgett.
Thank you, Worship. Under other business, I would like to be advised as to the status of the business license that has been requested by Mr. Gogo for his Christmas tree business on Pride Avenue.
There's a motion on the floor.
Yeah, we'll do it in a moment. That's okay. But I think I might have cut somebody else off. Councillor Bessert, was it you or somebody had...
No.
No, but I just wanted, I erased the board and I thought there was somebody else on there. Question, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Mr. Padgett, Councillor Padgett, please.
Once more, the same question. I'd like to be apprised of the status of the request for a business license by Mr. Gogo to proceed with his business of Christmas tree selling on Pride Avenue.
Thank you, Worship. Staff is in receipt of an application for a business license for Christmas sales from Mr. Gogo. We'll be processing that application and will likely be in a position to issue it at the end of the week.
And that's all we can do.
Your Worship, without other direction, staff is proceeding with issuance of the permit, yes.
Okay. Your Worship, to Mr. Swaby, if I may, I did send an email as a response to Mr. Swaby advising us last week that this request for a business license was underway. And I still have not been satisfied that the status, the legal non-conforming status that was given to Mr. Gogo in 1993 has not been of the kind of how should I put this? Let me rephrase that. I believe that the business that Mr. Gogo has conducted since 1993 on Pride Avenue has increased by quite a percentage. And I'm also of the understanding that part of the legal non-conforming status is that the business is supposed to be staying the same. And there's no doubt in my mind that the business has probably tripled since 1993. That being the case, why does this city not have a way, other than seemingly having to totally rely on Mr. Gogo to be forthcoming and give us the figures from 1993 on, which he has not done, that we can deal with this in an appropriate manner?
Your Worship, certainly it's Council's opportunity if you would like to hold a special hearing to review the business license. The only information we would have at this point would be the information that's provided by Mr. Gogo that I think Councillor Padgett is referring to, but the courts would look for pretty conclusive evidence that the actual use has expanded, and that would be the challenge for Council in determining whether you would like to not issue a business license to a particular person who has a non-conforming status. So the option for Council, of course, at this point is that you would direct staff not to issue the permit subject to a review by Council as a quasi-judicial board reviewing the business license. That doesn't come without risks, of course, in terms of the impact you would have on the business, especially at this point in time when the license has been applied for.
Would I have to move that now if that's what I wanted, or will I have another opportunity to do it? I need to think about it.
I think part of the problem, too, deals with the fact of privacy matters related to his sales. I think we have to deal with how we can obtain the record of sales if he chooses not to voluntarily present it, which he may do. But I think the onus may be on us to produce proof that his sales have gone up other than just an assumption.
Your Worship, and just to be clear, that increasing sales alone is not enough to take away his non-conforming status, because businesses do have increases in sales, and that's normally expected in the business world. So to use that as a reason to not award a business license, staff believe is fraught with difficulty.
But I think there was an understanding that he was granted, grandfathered in, if you wish, the right to sell them, and I understood that was as at the date of purchase, so that whatever sales had been occasioned at the date would be the maximum number of sales that would be allowed at this time some 20 years later. Is that not correct?
Your Worship, I think what Mr. Kenyon is saying is that the courts may not see that as the only reason to not issue a permit for an expansion of a non-conforming use. There may be other factors that the court would, if it was pursued by Mr. Gogo in terms of his ability to carry out his business. So it's not a straightforward issue that would require some research, and we would have to get legal advice if Council wanted to proceed with this.
Okay, and I think the other thing, I do believe we have the option of requiring traffic control and so on at that site should he proceed with sales, which presumably he will. Councillor Holden.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wonder if staff could explain, I think we've already done it in email, but if he could explain at least publicly what happened to the offer to Mr. Gogo to use Bevan Park or other sites that were publicly owned?
Your Worship, the Parks and Recreation Commission, through the chairman, Councillor McNabb, held discussions with the VIEX, which are tenants on the Bevan Park property, and discussions had occurred between Mr. Gogo and the VIEX, and I believe an agreement had been made about him operating on that site. However, Mr. Gogo's opinion, as we heard last meeting 2 weeks ago, was that he believed that he should be entitled to continue both at Pride Avenue and at Bevan Park, and the position taken by the city was that the offer to operate at the VIX at Bevan Park was conditional upon not operating at the Pride Avenue site.
So it has been withdrawn as an offer?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Ungar.
Thank you, Your Worship. To staff, has the city got the ability to withdraw the non-conforming status in the future so that this, let's say in time for next year and beyond?
The non-conforming status isn't something granted by the city, it's something granted by provincial law, and he has met the criteria to be granted non-conforming status, so it's not a choice that was made by the city, it just is.
So he can stay there forever in a residential area, run a business?
Yes.
I think the issue was it was zoned for that at the time of purchase, which was before the bylaw. Councillor Kipp.
Yeah, I'd just like a report from staff on some of legal non-conforming, some of how it works, and if there's any other lists that we have of other sites in the community that are legal non-conforming that cause concerns. So if I could just have some information on it. Thank you.
Want to move a motion?
Yeah, I'd like a motion.
Second motion. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed?
Thank you.
Carried.
Information about it.
Okay. We're going to, now we're going to move into delegations pertaining to items not on the agenda. We have, moved and seconded. Did we vote on that? Maybe not. No. The motion, I believe, has been passed, has it not?
Yes, it was passed.
And the motion was that it be referred to staff. Maybe, Ms. Harrison, would you like to give us, to assist the staff report? The last motion that was made was?
There was a request for a staff report on legal non-conforming use properties within the city.
And it passed. Thank you. Okay, we're going to now go into delegations pertaining to items not on the agenda, and up to 10 minutes. Okay. Question period, agenda items only.
And I apologize, I haven't addressed these issues with the staff question period at this time. I would like to ask why council, and I believe there was only a limited number, do not attend with the limited amount of citizens in a situation like Insight to hear both sides of the story from all parties concerned. Apparently there was 2 different meetings, and even from what I've heard tonight, the restricted area was green space. I didn't hear it as stabilization of the bank. I always heard it at any meeting I attended as green space. We'll turn on the mic.
It's on.
It is?
Yeah.
Well, the meeting I went to, it was always discussed as green space. And in my opinion, they couldn't build up into the bank because of the stability of the bank, and it would take large concrete walls and everything to protect whatever they build below it, was my impression from what was
I believe that's accurate. I think that's
being said there. So I even asked the question, which I don't see in the minutes here, is why were the lots not demanded to be greater depth to get away from that bank then and create your lot on the flat spot before the subdivision was created?
You mean wider lots instead of narrow, tall to the bank?
Greater depth. In other words, move the road and the frontage of the road away so you had a building area, not run into this problem. If
so
you've got
versus a wide.
You've got a problem of a report, you got to do something with the bank to try and stabilize it if you get into it. Excuse me. My next question is, does multi-housing and apartment blocks, etc., participate in the kitchen waste garbage collection?
I don't know. Do you want to... Oh, there we go. Go ahead.
Your Worship, the strata properties and multifamily developments that are not included in the city's garbage and recycling services at present will not be part of the city's kitchen waste program. There will, however, be things that take place through the regional district through bans on organic waste going into the landfill. And through those bans, the multifamily sector will be impacted. The RDN is presently working with the haulers in that regard.
But at this time, the individual resident is going to carry the load. And for instance, myself, I compost everything for many years. Why don't I want your bucket or any pickup? So therefore, my garbage is doubling in cost. I don't need a bucket. I don't want it. I compost everything.
But you pay for it.
Yeah. In fact, if you put potato peelings in your fire, it reduces creosote and all the stuff going up the chimney.
Well, I don't have a fire, so...
Your Worship, the city with the region undertook a pilot program for kitchen waste collection in the Departure Bay area, and all the surveys undertaken by the city and the region of the residents found very, very strong support, and I think that the majority of residents of the city are asking for this service, not tolerating it. Most of them want it, so I'm a bit surprised at Mr. Taylor's approach.
And my last question to the council is, I believe there's something in the community charter where if a business is suspended for longer than 6 months, they've got a problem renewing their license.
Your Worship, that doesn't apply for a seasonal occupation like this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to? Oh, please. No, we do have.
I'd like to introduce myself, Serge Valancourt. I think most of you probably know who I am, and I have a question.
Sorry, I think we need the address too for you.
Pardon?
For the file. We need name and address, sir, for the file. Address as well.
My name and
your address.
Where you live?
Where do you live?
in Nanaimo, 5320 Kenwill Drive.
Okay.
And the name is Serge Valancourt. And
sorry, this is to do with an agenda item, is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Agenda item: City Pound Keeper Animal Control Service contract. I'm questioning on option 2 why there is no mention of what the fee for the additional enforcement officer for the summer months. Because as I look at this, I think to myself, $365,000 a year, we're talking $1 million for 3 years of policing cats and dogs in the city. And when you consider city manager's wages being $250,000 a year, his responsibility to me would be far greater than that of pound keeper. How many employees are we talking about? And has the city ever considered, and why is this being contracted out as opposed to having people hired? Because unless I'm wrong, and I am assuming, so I could be wrong, that the pound is city-owned. So we're just talking about people running a business for the city. Why are we contracting out such, what seems to me, significant dollars that may not need to be spent?
Your Worship, in response to that, the city contracts this out because we believe that we receive good value, and that this is the most flexible and efficient way to provide this service. One of the advantages of contracts is that they are very flexible, and that changes can be made without impacting city employees negatively. So this has worked well in the past, and we believe it will continue to do so. It is more than just wages. They do operate from the city-owned facility. They care for the dogs and cats, provide them with their food and medical care as well as just the wages.
I thank you for your response. However, I still am not clear as to what the cost of the additional enforcement officer for the summer.
Oh, that's additional $20,000 added to the contract. Instead of being $345,000, it's $365,000.
Okay, so it's $1,000 for one additional person to help police the parks?
$20,000.
Oh, $20,000 for a part-time job for one
A seasonal job for an additional employee, that's right.
Okay, so how many employees are actually going to be performing the service for the contractor? I'm just trying to justify this expenditure.
Mr. Tucker, do you know the answer to how many employees are at the animal control shelter?
I believe it's 2.
2 employees. So we're talking 2 and 1 part employee for $375,000 a year?
And the vehicles to perform the duties that are involved in the service. So okay. It's more than just...
Excuse me, I apologize. I'll call you back. I should have silenced that. No, the reason why I'm getting involved is recently 2 items have come in my radar that I found totally unacceptable. And I'm sure you're aware of the ones that I'm talking about. That's why I wrote letters to the editor. And that's why I want to start taking an active role in my community and I am concerned about the way we're going and the money, how it's being spent, and status quo, in my mind, is not acceptable. Because I was raised, watch your pennies, your dollars will take care of themselves.
Yeah, okay, just remember what you're here for. It's to ask, this is called the question period, not to make statements or speeches.
I'm sorry, I
the question
apologize for the
period.
speech.
And let me answer you the thing here, that we publicly tendered this contract. It was publicly tendered. And we had, I believe, 2 responses, and there may have been more. So you could have submitted an answer yourself if you wished.
I understand
it was
that,
made a public
Your
one. This is one thing we disappointed. And this was the basis of a decision was made on what we felt was the best submission. And it was open to the public, open to anyone to respond to it.
Your Worship, I did not question why you chose one contractor over the other. I did not question the process. I just questioned why it is going out to tender as opposed to having staff do this, hiring individuals, because the cost factor is far greater by handing this over to 3 individuals at that price.
I'm not sure that it is, because I believe staff looked at that option and made a comparison on it, and I think that they believed that it was less expensive to do it that way. Remember, you're talking 24/7 operation, and holidays, stats, everything. Now, they work around the clock. And
they have to feed the animals, too. And that's an expense.
Right.
Well, I think that's what he'd like is an explanation of the breakdown of 300,000. And I wish staff would give Mr. Valancourt the breakdown of the contract because there's pet food, cars, everything.
We would be happy to meet with the delegation and review what's required of the contract. I think that would be good for both parties to have input back and forth.
Okay.
Okay, that would be satisfactory. I'm sorry if I got off topic, but
no, not
I
a bit.
am concerned.
No, you have every right to be.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. I'm sorry, the microphone's been cut off.
The individual of all the jobs the animal control contractor, regardless of who it is, does. He picks up bicycles, he picks up deer, does all kinds of other things in the city, and to account for the expenditure, dogs is maybe 30% of the cost, or the amount that's done. And nobody else pays towards it, like in licensing. The poor old dog owner is the only person, and he's only 30% of the picture. So let's tell the individual all the work the contractor does for
I wish you could have. He's left.
But I did discuss that with Peter, sorry.
No, but it was a valid point, Mr. Taylor, and the point's well taken. I just wish the gentleman asked Mr. Tucker some questions and then left, because I think the points you raised are relevant. It was interesting to know, but
That's up to staff to jump in and help you guys.
Okay. Is there a second? We stand adjourned.
I'd like to stay a little longer.